I remembered to hit record this time. All right, welcome to tonight's public information session on the Norlite facility in Cohoes. You should hear me right now. If you're not able to hear me for technical difficulties, please call 518-491-3537. I'm also putting that in the chat right now. Starting off tonight, we're going to have the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation's Chief of Staff start things off. Sean Mahar.
Thank you, Regina, and welcome everyone to tonight's presentation. Following up from our most recent one in December, we wanted to obviously, like we said, keep a good steady stream of these events going on to keep you informed of all the activities and work that's underway by DEC and the Department of Health to oversee the Norlite facility. We do have a very lengthy agenda tonight on a number of topics that I know are of interest to folks, and we want to obviously save as much time for your questions as we can. So I'm not going to say too much. I think Regina has kicked us off here with some of the protocols, but before we turn it over to some of our experts tonight, wanted to give Mayor Keeler an opportunity to welcome folks tonight. Mayor, thanks for joining us, and say a few words.
Hi, Sean. Good evening, everyone. I just want to thank you all for joining in this, which is the third in a series of virtual public information sessions on Norlite-related issues. Community input is so important right now. In January of 2020, my first days in office, I proactively reached out to the Cohoes Housing Authority and asked them to permanently close the Saratoga Sites Federal Housing Complex and relocate its 70 families to other more suitable apartments in Cohoes. Low-income housing should never have been built in that industrial area, and Saratoga Sites residents have complained about dust and odors going back to day one. And I'm pleased to report that the Cohoes Housing Authority is 100% on board with my proposal and has taken initial steps to close Saratoga Sites, but much more needs to be done at the federal government level, and it won't happen overnight, but the ball is at least rolling now. Also in January of 2020, I began a dialogue with officials from Norlite. I've toured the facility and the grounds, and I personally relayed my community's concerns and in turn listened as company employees discussed various efforts Norlite has made to address the issues, including a recent multi-million-dollar pollution control upgrade, and we'll hear more on that tonight from DEC. In February of 2020, my staff and I began meeting with regulators from DEC and the Department of Health after learning that the company had previously incinerated firefighting foam. We had and still have a lot of questions about the potential environmental and health impacts of that incineration, and I thank both departments for their significant and ongoing efforts to provide the people of Cohoes and the surrounding communities with answers to our many questions. In the past week or so, a new question has arisen regarding a recent fire at the facility, and an old question has gathered renewed interest, and that is the issue of fugitive dust in the vicinity of Saratoga Street. So I'll turn the meeting back over to Sean and the folks from DEC so they can provide important updates and continue answering our questions. But going forward, I will continue to work with the Cohoes Housing Authority, with DEC and Norlite officials in my efforts to eliminate any adverse health and safety issues potentially affecting the people of Cohoes and our neighboring communities. So everybody, thank you very much for being in on this. DEC, thank you especially.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks again for hosting us this evening as well. Obviously, we're continuing to do these virtually during the pandemic. We would prefer to be doing these in person as soon as we can. We do look forward to having some availability sessions and more direct public engagement. But for now, we wanted to keep these virtually and provide a good forum for you to get updates and get your questions answered. And we're going to leave a lot of time tonight for a robust dialogue. So as the mayor said, there are a number of hot button issues that have gained community interest over the last month or so. And our first presenter tonight is going to be Ben Potter, who I know is known to many of you. He's going to give us a walkthrough of the comprehensive performance tests that the Norlite facility performed under our oversight through our direction. He's also going to talk about the fugitive dust issues that have recently come underway and talk a little bit more about what the department is going to be doing to better investigate that. And also an update on some of the complaints that we received, and also a call to make sure that we are getting complaints, because one of the key things you'll hear tonight is the need for the department to hear from you on complaints about what's going on in your community so that we can hold the facility accountable. And that's obviously our goal here. We work on your behalf day in and day out to oversee this facility, and we need to hear from you when things are going wrong. So Ben's going to go a little bit into that. Last month, or back in December in our last meeting, there was much interest in learning more about our water programs oversight of the Norlite facility. So we have some of our water experts from our regional office on tonight. We're going to talk about our SPDES program, our State Pollution Discharge Elimination System program. And then we'll give an update on the permit review process that's underway if we have time. We're hopeful that we can move through this agenda. There is a lot to cover tonight, and if we don't get to everything, we obviously will keep this dialogue going, and we'll have more opportunities in the future. But that's our agenda for this evening. As you'll see, we'll be pausing periodically for questions around each time. Like we did last time, we'll start with folks on the phone and then turn it over to those that are on the WebEx to ask questions. Again, in the chat function, you can relay questions during the session tonight, and we'll help guide some of the dialogue that we have going on. But again, on the screen now is how you can ask a question. Again, for those that are on the phone, to raise your hand so that we can unmute your line, *3 will allow you to raise your hand so we can call on you when it's that portion of the agenda. But right now we want to dive right in, and it's my honor once again to introduce Ben, who's going to give us a walkthrough of the comprehensive performance test. So Ben, why don't you take us away?
Thanks again for that introduction, Sean. I have a lot of information to go over tonight, and as I finish each section, I'll give you time for some questions and some answers. So we'll move right on into the next slide. Tonight, what I'll be going over, as Sean already discussed, is the comprehensive performance test results. And these results at this point are preliminary. We received these results relatively not too long ago, and we went through them so that we can give an update on what we've seen. So these are preliminary, and we will continue to go through them to finalize them. This is an update. I will also be speaking about the fugitive dust issues and the fugitive dust plan, talking about our investigation into the issues surrounding it, the evaluation we've been performing, and the upgrades that we're looking at. And finally, tonight I will speak about complaint response and the complaints received by DEC. So getting into the comprehensive performance test results, we'll move on to the next slide. To review for anyone tonight that does not know, the purpose of the comprehensive performance test was to demonstrate compliance with the air emission standards required by EPA and the National Emission Standards for Hazardous Air Pollutants. This test was performed back in November, and the whole purpose of this was to ensure that Project Delta was meeting all the emission standards of the federal regulations. Next slide. As I said, these are preliminary reviews. We have to go through several hundred pages of the report. So what we're going to be talking about tonight is the main emission standards and where they met, how they're met, and operational parameters and how they're going to be complying with federal law. So there has been an in-depth review of the CPT results already, but that is still occurring. And the complete review, we should be finished. The team that is working on this, we should be finished in a few to several weeks, and we'll have the complete results and the acceptance of the notice of compliance. So moving on. What the notice of compliance does is it tells DEC and it tells the public that Norlite has met emission standards. It also establishes all the continuous monitoring parameters that Norlite needs to operate to ensure the emission standards are being met at all times. Norlite was required to submit that within 90 days of completion of the CPT, and that was submitted, the notice of compliance was submitted to DEC on January 8th, 2021. And it was well within the time frame, and DEC, the team that is working on this, expedited the review immediately so we can get information out to the public tonight. So we can move to the next slide. Along with the CPT, something I have not spoke about yet was DEC required a kiln temperature study. Some of the comments coming in from citizen scientists were asking questions about the temperature of the combustion zone in the kiln. Was that temperature appropriate to incinerate and destroy certain pollutants? So what DEC required in addition to the CPT was a kiln temperature study. That study was received on January 8th, 2021, the same day that we received the notice of compliance. What this did was it requested additional information besides the federal compliance, and that allows DEC and the federal government to correlate combustion zone temperatures with the temperatures that are being monitored in the Title V permit. So that can ensure any pollution going through there, we can provide a real scientific study, was it destroyed? The review of that temperature study is also being completed right now with the notice of compliance study. So same time frame, looking to complete those reviews of both studies. Moving forward. This slide represents the results, the emission results of the compliance test. I clipped this directly from the notice of compliance report, and why this is here is to display what the results of each type of pollution that is monitored by the federal requirements. So I'm going to go through this, and I'm going to fully explain each of the ones that will be of concern following in this presentation. The first item marked PCDDs, PCDS, that is dioxin and furans. So what we saw here, the regulatory limit it has to be less than 0.2 nanograms per dry standard cubic meter. The results are in the middle columns for both kilns, and both results were below the regulatory limit, meaning that they met the emission standard that they needed to, based on spiking and having a high level of dioxins and furans during that test. The next slide is mercury, which I will be further discussing in this presentation. What you'll see is the regulatory limit of 120 micrograms per dry standard cubic meter, and what you see in Kiln 1 and Kiln 2 results is an exceedance of that standard. I'm going to go into great detail about the mercury to address concerns with the public and concerns with everybody regarding exceeding a standard. So following this, we're going to have an in-depth discussion of mercury and how compliance is achieved even though the test showed an exceedance of the emission standard. So moving on, because I will go back to mercury as I promised in this presentation, and I will fully explain that, and I will answer all questions. No, I'm sorry, I didn't mean moving on to the next slide. Go back to that one. I'm going to finish going through that. The next part is semi-volatile metals and low volatile metals. The improvement there in the Project Delta, they're greatly exceeding the regulatory limit on both of those. Carbon monoxide also, they are well below the limit. I'm sorry, the semi-volatile and low metals are well below the limit, not exceeding the limit. They're well below it. Total hydrocarbons below, hydrochloride and chlorine below the limits. Particulate matter, also another topic that we have discussed in great detail in past presentations. I'm going to focus on this again because there's been a lot of concern, public concern over particulate matter, soot or dust or things coming out of the stacks. So I'm going to go into greater detail with particulate matter as well as mercury. The results that you can see in this table were an order of magnitude below the standard. As I discussed in viewing the filters in the last presentation, what we saw on the filters and why I shared that is because this is what we expected to see with the results. We expected to see numbers like this by looking at that filter. So you can see with the results here, we're well below the particulate standard, orders of magnitude. And DRE is the last in this chart. DRE standing for destruction and removal efficiency. This is another great concern. We've had the EC has had comments from the public, comments from citizen scientists, and what you see is the limit is 99.99% destruction. That means that is the level of destruction we need. What we saw in results of the test for kiln 1, 99.9980, and in kiln 2, 99.9995. So both are meeting the regulatory limits and doing what is expected. So now we can move forward on the slide. Now, as I said, I'm going to go into detail with mercury, and any questions that remain after I finish this presentation, feel free to ask in the question section after this. So mercury was looking at the limit, 120 micrograms per dry standard cubic meter. Kiln 1, 197, kiln 2, 223. Now, the reason that this was exceeded is the purpose of the test, the purpose of the CPT, the comprehensive performance test, is to put Norlite to the brink. You want to test in the worst case condition because we want to ensure, DEC wants to ensure that if a worst case condition ever is found to happen in Norlite, that we understand compliance is there. So if, for chance, mercury feed rate was at a certain level, we want to ensure compliance. So what Norlite chose to do is to conduct the CPT was a worst case scenario feed rate for mercury of approximately 0.01 pounds per hour. And that was chosen based on preliminary testing. They wanted to reach a value that they wanted to see if that could be destroyed. So if it ever got there, if the feed rate ever got to that level, would everything be destroyed? What the test showed is no. At 0.01 pounds per hour, no, you would not meet the standard. So our job as DEC and what Norlite has to do in this notice of compliance is, since that feed rate did not work, what can Norlite do to show that they meet the emission standard of 120 microgram per dry standard cubic meter? So next slide. So what Norlite has to do, because that 0.01 pounds per hour feed rate of mercury does not meet that standard, they have to they have to calculate based on the maximum theoretical emissions concentration, meaning they have to assume that that control system that they just built is not there. There is no control system. So how much mercury they're feeding, they have to assume is coming out and going into the atmosphere. And they then have to limit that feed rate of mercury so that it doesn't exceed the standard as if that control system was not even there. And what we saw in the results of the notice of compliance is the system does get control, but to maintain compliance and to prove compliance with that emission standard, they're not allowed to say that that is doing anything for mercury. So they have to look at the feed rate and determine what feed rate is going to equate to 100 micrograms per dry standard cubic meter and meet not only that standard, but then the annual standard. There are also, besides the feed rate of mercury, what is in the LLGF, the hazardous waste fuel, DEC also is looking at any mercury content that is natural in the shale. So all sources of mercury are looked at during this test. Shale had to be sampled at the same time the fuel was sampled. And the total mercury, which was around 0.02 pounds per hour, is actually the feed rate. But what Norlite can limit to ensure compliance is the feed rate from the hazardous waste pollution. So that's what Norlite had to do in the notice of compliance. They established a 0.007 pound per hour feed rate of mercury in the hazardous waste fuel. What that does is it ensures that the total emissions at that feed rate are less than 120 micrograms per dry standard cubic meter. And that 0.007 pounds per hour also specifies and relates to New York state standards, which I'm going to go further into detail on mercury. So we can move forward. Slide. The New York state mercury emission compliance is more stringent than EPA's. New York state looks at, we have a toxic regulation, and we limit all facilities to a certain amount of mercury allowed to be coming out. When you look at the 120 microgram per dry standard cubic meter, the EPA standard, what that equates to is approximately 170 pounds per year total coming out of the stacks. So New York state, well, we limit mercury further to around 50 pounds of mercury coming out. So what New York state allows is much less than what EPA allows. And how we have to look at that is look at that feed rate that is noticed in the compliance. The notice of compliance will specify the feed rate. When we reviewed this notice of compliance, we have to ensure that feed rate that they're saying that Norlite is saying they're going to operate at is at that level. So at the 0.007 pounds per hour feed rate, that equates to 54 pounds annually of mercury emissions, which meets New York state standards. And you can move ahead a slide. So a question and a concern that DEC had, and we know that the public is going to have, is you're hearing that during this test, mercury was exceeded. They exceeded the standard. The first question anybody's going to ask is, how does that testing, since they exceeded during that, how does that affect me? Is there any health implications? Was I exposed to something that I shouldn't be exposed to? And DEC has taken that into account. And the first thing we did is we looked at that. We modeled the mercury emissions based on that feed rate, based on the emission rate reported in the notice of compliance. We know exactly what the emission rate was. So we model, and what we're doing in modeling is we want to see the concentration that the closest person is receiving. So we look at the distance to the closest receptor, meaning person that could be exposed, and what concentration is that? Are you at a concentration that is within the guidelines that have been set for mercury? So what this slide is representing, I'm not reading off it, obviously, but what we're looking at first would be the short-term guideline concentration. So how much mercury are you exposed to in an hour? We know the rate of mercury coming out of the stacks when they were exceeding. So that short-term guideline concentration is 0.6 micrograms per cubic meter. Based on those mercury emission rates that I was discussing that we see in the NOC, based on that spiked fuel for that worst-case burn, the modeling showed that the concentration at the closest receptor, or their max concentration, would be 0.07 micrograms per cubic meter. So even though that standard, that EPA standard was exceeded during the test, the concentration at the closest receptor, the max concentration for a receptor, was an order of magnitude under that short-term guideline concentration. So your acute dose, the quick dose that the short-term guideline concentration is based on was well under the guideline. So there's not an issue with exceeding that short-term guideline concentration. And what we also look at is during that test, we know that the mercury was exceeded during the test and while they burnt that fuel that was spiked. So we also have something called the AGC, the annual guideline concentration. and that's something we look at. We look at all facilities, and we look at the total amount of mercury, and based on the total amount of mercury emitted for a year, we have to ensure that the concentration related to that annual emissions is below the level. And that, at the end of the year, as we add all that mercury that was emitted during that time, we're going to ensure that that is under the 0.3 microgram per cubic meter. So, and that's done on an annual basis. The short-term basis we can do immediately, and we have to let time go by in order to determine the annual guideline to ensure that it's met. But based on the short-term guideline and what we're seeing through the modeling, the annual guideline will be met as well. And any questions you have about that, when I finish the CPT results, we can go back and we can talk about any of this. So we can move on to the next slide. As I said earlier, we've talked about this on past presentations. We've had citizen scientists question the destruction and removal efficiency. Several people have been looking into this. So why I added this from the NOC was I want to show everyone what the DRE, what the destruction and removal efficiency was for this test. What we did, what DEC had Norlite do for the test, is spike with a known contaminant to ensure that that contaminant was destroyed during the test. We chose, as I talked about in the last presentation, a primary organic hazardous constituent, chlorobenzene, is what was determined. That's a worst-case pollutant. If that's destroyed, we look at the rest of the pollutants going through that fuel stream as being destroyed. So spiking chlorobenzene into the emissions, the DRE came out to be 99.8, 99.9. It was over, or 99.998 or 9, sorry. And it was we met the standard of 99.99%. So this was kiln 1 results, and the regulatory limit being 99.99. The average of the 3 test runs where DEC was determining DRE was 99.998, a greater efficiency than what is required. And I'm getting some notes. Does everyone have my audio? I can see some nodding heads.
I think we still hear you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so we can move on to kiln 2, destruction and removal efficiency. Next slide. Kiln 2, also chlorobenzene spike. We monitored that spike during the testing, so it was a constant feed from a constant source. We had a drum of chlorobenzene, and during the entire testing runs that DRE was being determined, that was being spiked into the fuel feed at a constant rate that was constantly measured during the test. All that data is available in the Notice of Compliance results and the CPT results. Again, 99.9995% destruction removal efficiency for chlorobenzene, meeting that regulatory limit of 99.99. And we can move ahead. Directly related to that destruction removal efficiency, and why I'm touching on this and why I'm going into great detail on this is there is a lot of public concern about what has gone through and what is going through Norlite's kiln as hazardous waste fuel. That concern has been rallying around are those pollutants being destroyed, or are they being destroyed? Are they being completely broken apart? Are the temperatures enough to do what needs to be done to completely break down all pollutants? Now, this kind of a study, looking at the temperature, is exactly the science that needs to be done to make those determinations. And as science evolves in the area of pollutant destruction, this is exactly where it starts. This is what is needed to prove all those points to anyone looking at it. Any science person looking at it, this is what they're going to need. So that's why this was required during the CPT in addition, so we have more information. And what this temperature correlation study does is it demonstrates that relationship between the monitored parameter in the Title V permit, which is the back end of the kiln, and then the front end of the kiln, which is called the combustion chamber. In the combustion chamber of the kiln is where the destruction of the pollutants is happening. So it's imperative to know in that first 30 feet of the kiln, which is defined as that combustion zone, what is the temperature at all times? And is that related, and does it truly correspond to what we're monitoring on the back end? That's what this study is going to define, to show, and give all the data that anyone needs to show that correlation. This correlation, it will ensure the temperature in the combustion zone remains operating at a temperature sufficient to destroy the constituents in the fuel. So whatever we're looking at in that fuel, we'll know the temperature in the residence time meaning how long does that pollutant stay in the combustion zone or in the kiln. So all pollutants have to have a temperature to destroy them, and they have to remain in that temperature long enough to be destroyed. These are the things that this study is looking at to give full proof for anyone to determine if that has been done with any type of pollutant. This temperature correlation study moving forward, it will establish a data collection and facility monitoring to ensure efficient operation of the kilns. Now, at any time, the monitor, the on-site monitor, myself, any other DEC employee that goes to the site can walk up to the kilns, walk up to the combustion zone of the kilns, and I can see the pyrometry data. The pyrometers are the instrument used to take that temperature. And that's real time. I'm looking into the fire burning in the kiln, and I can see the temperature that it's happening as I'm looking at it. And also, what's happening with that data and with those devices that are in the end of a kiln, they go to the data monitoring system that Norlite operates. And that data is held there. And they can tell at all times that, is that temperature appropriate? So that's not in the permit. What has been decided and agreed upon with EPA is to monitor the back end of the kiln. But now we have this data to show everything that we need to see that relates to that back end. And as I just said, the study and having this data at all times and having Norlite be able to give us this data at all times, even in the future, not just for this study, but they can always provide us with this data. They can monitor it and they can give DEC or EPA that data. We'll always have that ability to do this in the future when we look at anything, any type of pollutant going through there. This allows EPA and allows DEC to continue evaluating that temperature and use that anywhere else that it may relate to in any other facility, any other process like this. These are the things that we're moving towards and the information that we need to do our jobs the best we possibly can. What this temperature study has done is it has provided clear and concise evidence supporting that 2200 to 3000 degrees that was in question. We had comments from citizen scientists, comments from the public, comments from everybody. What is that temperature and how do we know? How do we know that it's maintaining that? How do we know it's sufficient to destroy a pollutant that's going through there? This is that step. This is what we need to show scientifically what's happening in the combustion zone and is it appropriate for what's being handled in that combustion zone. So in the future, moving forward with the Title V permit modification and the permit renewal and treating this as if it's new, what that looks like moving forward is this data can be retained, not in so much a monitoring or a set point limit because it doesn't work like that, but it can be retained in a manner that it's always available to the state or to the federal government so that we can determine that everything is operating exactly the way it should be. And we can move forward. So as I said in the beginning slide, I know it's a lot of information here. I wanted to touch on those three things. I wanted to touch on mercury, DRE, destruction removal efficiency, and particulate. And particulate, coming back full circle to last presentation, there was a lot of claims of coming out of the stacks and the deposits being caused by what is coming out of the stacks. So why I'm including this is this demonstrates what the results were from the test. What we actually saw in the filters when they were weighed and then they were analyzed and measured, the limit of being 0.025, what we're seeing is 0.0026, 0.0019 for kiln 1s and kiln 2 respectively. And it's an order of magnitude better than the standard. The new system is working better than the old system for particulate and better than most systems that we can review and we can see. So for particulate, the baghouse and the rest of that control system is doing its job. So particulate, dust, or ash or soot coming from stacks, this shows that that's not the issue. It's what's being deposited. It's not coming from the stacks. This is the proof of that right there. So now we can focus. The reason why I'm including this, the reason why I'm talking about it, is because we need to DEC needs to focus the attention on the right areas of the facility to deal with the problems being experienced by the public. And that's exactly what we're doing. That's exactly why we do these tests, is so we can focus our attention on the areas that need it and make sure things are being done right. And you can move forward. Why we added this slide, the team that I work with, reviewing everything, I thought it was important to show some of the improvements that Project Delta has brought. Now, this is a comparison of what from the old system to 2017 test results to the 2020 results. And it's just transparency. Everyone can see the difference between. So if you're looking at dioxin and furans, you're 25% on the new system of the standards. Both systems were well within the standard, well below the standard. Mercury, we've already discussed that, so this is a little bit misleading looking at this slide because they don't treat mercury from the actual standard and actual values they got during the test. We already talked about how they're in compliance with that. So this chart really doesn't work for mercury. Semi-volatile and low-volatile metals. I said the system before was more efficient, and the results you can see for yourself. 47% of the standard on the old system. This Project Delta is 0.44% of the standard and 0.27 for low volatile, 2.7% of the standard for low volatile metals. It's a big improvement. Hydrogen chloride and chlorine were 0.4% of the standard. Again, a big improvement, even though they were below the standard before. Particulate matter, big improvement, and carbon monoxide, it was an improvement. And I added this to show that Project Delta is like how it's better. What has been the improvements based on Project Delta, and here they are. So we can move forward. Now, before anyone starts asking questions, I'm just going to ask right now, limit the questions to the CPT results in the NOC, and as I get into the next topics, we'll have questions on those.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And we will open the phone lines in just a second. Again, if you are on the phone, if you hit *3, that will raise your hand and we can unmute your line. But before we do that, there's some very technical questions on the mercury, obviously, Ben, but to Mr. Ritchie's question about the fire response and evacuations. Joe, just so you know, we will talk about that a little bit more in a bit, but generally with regard to evacuations, as first responders, the city of Cohoes, through the contingency plan and response management plan, they manage evacuations. The fire was put out very quickly by them. DEC was notified after the fire was out, and that's when we responded to the scene, and Ben can talk a little bit about that fire later on. With regard to also, there's some questions from attendees just about seeing the other attendees. We thought we had that fixed for this, but we are working to address that so folks can see who is on. I know we have about 102 people on this evening, and we thank you all for joining us tonight. I know with the chats that are going back and forth, you can see some of the names that are on there. Ben, with regard to the MACT and the Air Title V permit. Is any of this that you talked about with regard to these emission limits going to be in the Air Title V permit?
All the operation parameters. So what the CPT, the purpose of the CPT, is to establish the monitoring parameters that ensure compliance with those emission standards. So immediately upon receiving the notice of compliance and how they meet the emission standards for each of those pollutants, the operational parameter limits, such as temperatures, sorbent feed rates, lime feed rates, baghouse conditions, flow rates, all those operational parameter limits that are determined during the testing, they're effective immediately upon receipt from DC, receipt of DC of that notice of compliance. When the Title V is rewritten and updated, all those operational parameter limits, meaning the temperatures and the flow rates and the lime feed rates and all those things about how they operate the air pollution control equipment, those will be in the Title V permit. So the Title V renewal will include everything from this CPT.
Great. Trying to see. I think we'll just open up the questions now, and I think there's some questions on sampling as I'm scrolling through here quick. We are going to require a resampling for the mercury standard just to make sure that the new feed rate adjustments that we're requiring are going to be met, and we'll have some more data to share on that. But let's open up the phone lines now, Regina, if we can. Again, if you're on the phone and listening in, if you'd like to ask a question of Mr. Potter, please hit *3 at this time to raise your hand.
Okay. Am I unmuted? Yeah. Okay. So, Joe Ritchie, I'm unmuting your line right now.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, Joe.
Hi, I just had a quick question in regards to these, just the stack tests, because there seems to be some confusion. So I'm just saying hypothetically, if the emission standards were not met, would then the people of Saratoga sites and Cohoes then be exposed to those chemicals that are being permanently tested?
I went over that in the slide in pretty good detail, I thought. So what happens, and what we did based on that exceedance, Joe, was we looked at the emission rate that was the emission rate of the exceedance. So the only thing that was exceeded was mercury. So we looked at the exact and acute emission rate of mercury during those exceedances and during that whole time trial of the test where they burnt that fuel, and we modeled that. We modeled that exceedance. We modeled that high emission rate to ensure that the SGC was met. SGC meaning short-term guideline concentration and AGC meaning annual guideline concentration. So we took into account the exact emission rate of the exceedance to ensure that those concentrations were met for the receptors and what anyone that was close by could have been exposed to. And it was an order of magnitude under what the guideline concentrations are.
I think I understood that part, and I think my question was understand correctly. Maybe I didn't say it right. But if when a stack test is performed, are those then emissions, somehow controlled? Or are they just let out into the environment?
That was the exact purpose of modeling. So what was let out into the environment, that exact emission rate of what left the stacks, is what we modeled.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. That's why I'm here to answer questions and explain. I want you all to understand and feel comfortable with what I'm saying.
Yep. Thank you, Joe. Regina, do we have any other phone callers who would like to ask a question?
Yep. Can you hear me okay right now?
Yep.
Okay. Diana, I'm unmuting your line right now.
Thank you.
Hi, Diana.
And I have a question regarding the mercury. Is the mercury all inorganic, or is some of it organic?
What we're looking at is total.
Total? So from your experience in looking at, what Norlite incinerates, what would be that ratio of organic to inorganic?
That is an extremely technical question that I would have to go through those papers, and it's going to be all elemental. Everything coming out is elemental.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Diana.
Thanks, Sean.
I saw another question. Sorry to interrupt you, Sean. I saw another question come through that I didn't touch on that's pretty important. And someone I saw in the chat asked how do we know that feed rate of mercury is consistent? And I think that's pretty important because we know it's being fed to those kilns at all times because Norlite has to monitor the amount of mercury in their feed. So the tanks that are being mixed with the hazardous waste that contain mercury, every single tank that is batch fed to those kilns, we know the exact amount of mercury, we know the exact flow rate of hazardous waste fuel going to those kilns, and we know the concentration of mercury in it. That has to be tested for every single batch.
Excellent. Thanks, Ben. I was just noticing that one too and was going to circle back on that. Appreciate it. Regina, do we have any other call-in folks who'd like to ask a question?
Yep, we have Christopher.
Oh, hi, thanks. Yeah, I had a question. I popped it in the chat, but also would like some follow-up on it.
Yeah, Chris, I was trying to unpack that quickly here, but I figured you would ask it in a moment.
Yeah, sure. Just how you arrive at the acceptable feed rate of 0.007, and that seems like it's only 15% lower than the test, and that would, in my math, simple back of the envelope calculations.
0.02 to 0.007.
0.02 to 0.007. But then you have to add in the content from the shale, right?
Right. 0.02 is total.
Okay.
That's shale and fuel.
That's great. That's the clarification I was looking for.
Yeah, no problem. That's why I'm here to answer these questions.
That meets the 54-pound limit for the state, or does that get them down to the federal limit?
So the 0.007 pounds per hour, that gets based on all the operational parameter limits being set. That gets Norlite down to 54 pounds of annual emissions, and that meets the the toxic rule. I'll just say it, the toxic rule for New York State.
Okay, and I'm going to steal a question that I saw in the chat related to this. Is that 54 pounds total for the entire operation, or is that per stack?
Correct. That's total. That's total. That's both kilns, and that's a max. That's an absolute max. Okay. Whether it reaches 54, he can tell you at the end of the year, but that's the most they can reach.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris. I know I was going to circle back to that one as well and clarify that, so appreciate that. Regina, do we have any other call-in users who would like to ask a question on the CPT? Oh, Regina, we can't hear you.
Diana, hi. Diana, your hand's still raised. Did you have another question? Oh, she just muted. No. Oh, Joe Ritchie has a question.
Sean and
Alexis. Oh,
can you please tell me? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
So I'm confused about the new guidelines that are out for ambient monitoring. How do those relate to the regulations? So I think comments due by February the 12th. They list all these same elements, and I was just looking at them, and I just wasn't sure how that list of elemental guidelines relates to the regulations.
It's a separate. If you're looking at I'm sorry. It's a little bit out of my purview as Regional Air Pollution Control Engineer. We have groups that are assigned to this. I'm going to try to answer. I'm assuming you're talking about DAR 1.
I think it's R1. It's ambient levels.
Right. So
air quality levels.
And Ben, actually, we do have Tom Gentile on the line from our air program as well. Tom, do you want to take that question now?
I'm not sure if Tom is a panelist.
Yep. Diana, what we can do is just put you in touch with Tom Gentile on that, and he can walk you through DAR1, which is underway right now.
You can just get me his contact information. I made some calls, but I could never find the right person.
Yep.
So thank you.
Yep, Tom is your right person, and we'll make sure we put you in touch with him.
Okay. I'm raising my hand.
Thank you, Diana.
Okay. I have a message that Judith Hank was trying to ask a question. So Judith, I'm going to find you really quick and unmute yours.
And as you're doing that, Diana, just so you're aware too, DAR1 is up for public comment. So there is information on our website on that. And again, we'll put you in touch with Tom Gentile, and he can address any questions you have on that. But Judith, if you're on, take it away.
Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Thanks. Sorry, I couldn't figure it out. And lucky for you, I will not sing. I will just ask 3 questions. One is on the mercury. So 50 pounds per year meets the standard, and Norlite's at 54 pounds per year. So whether it's 50 or 54, that sure seems like a lot of mercury going into the air every year, because doesn't it take like a tablespoon of mercury to contaminate a 200-acre lake in the Adirondacks? Am I understanding that Norlite is permitted to emit total 50 pounds of mercury annually into the air?
If we go with the EPA standards, it's 187, I think. So New York has.
For New York, it's 50?
Yes.
Okay. It's a lot of airborne mercury. Does DEC have the ability to lower that, or you allow that? You have to allow that consistently at every stationary source?
Changing the standards for what's allowed in the air is done through legislation. So what I have as regional air pollution control engineer, I have the standards given and have to ensure that. So to change anything like that, you're looking at going a legislative route.
And how does 50 pounds a year from Norlite compare to other stationary sources for mercury emissions? Is Norlite top 5, bottom of the list? 50 pounds seems like a lot to me a year.
Without having that full list right in front of me, I don't want to say something that would be wrong to that. I mean, okay. we can of course look at mercury emissions. We have annual statements. We have toxic impact analysis. We have all those guidelines we can take a look at. But for me to make a statement without all that right in front of me that's not professional at all for me to say that right now.
Maybe you could get back to me on what are the annual emissions allowed at various facilities around New York State and where Norlite falls in the pack. Thank you. And the second question is, last fall, was it October that DEC did PFAS sampling for soil and surface water? I may have the month wrong. I think it was October. When will those results be shared with the public?
Yeah, thanks, Judith. And I was going to mention that later on in the evening. I forgot to do it in my opening. But our team is still poring over that data. They're producing a comprehensive report, as we promised to the community. And very soon we are going to schedule a meeting to roll that out or incorporate it into our next scheduled meeting here. But our goal is to obviously get that out soon, but we wanted to create the right space for our researchers to get the data, really pour into it. The validation process obviously took time as well. And now they're just in the process of finalizing that report. So they weren't prepared for tonight. I know we had a lot of other topics on the agenda tonight to cover, but we will be getting that out very soon.
Thank you. And my last question is, in advertising public meetings, the public is invited to submit written comments questions in advance. Which I did for the last meeting. I didn't do for this meeting because I haven't gotten responses to my written questions from the last meeting. Do you have a sense of when I can get the responses to my questions from the meeting a few months ago?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Judith. I thought we had responses too, but I'll double check with the team and make sure we get back to you because I thought we did send something out. So we'll make sure that gets out.
Got it.
I think we lost you right now. All right, well, thank you for your questions. Regina, do we have anyone else in the WebEx who has a hand raised that would like to ask a question this time?
Chris, your hand was still raised. Did you have another question?
No, sorry, I guess I didn't put it down.
No,
I did see Dave Walker in the chat had a question about the fraction of mercury from the shale versus the fuel waste. I think you mentioned that before, but maybe just to repeat it.
Yep, I can answer that. I'll give you approximate numbers. So the feed rate from the hazardous waste fuel feed was approximately 0.01 pounds per hour for each. I mean, I'm giving you approximate numbers here. And the way that the samples were taken for the shale was systematically, if you look at there was continuous sampling of the shale as the test was going on to look at the mercury. So it was an average taken over all those samples.
And real quick, does that mean that they have to slow the rate of their processing?
Yeah.
Both in terms of shale and in terms of hazardous waste?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the operational parameter limits is how much shale is being fed.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Chris. All good questions. So I think we'll get back to our formal presentation now, and we'll obviously pause for some more questions throughout the evening as well, but those are all good questions. We're glad folks have to ask them. Up next, we're going to continue on with Ben now, who's going to continue to talk about the fugitive dust on the site and some of the investigation work that we have underway. So Ben, take it away.
All right. Continuing. One of the concerns that DEC has been hearing from the public and looking into is fugitive dust and what is coming off the site and depositing on Saratoga sites. And DEC hears the public complaints. We hear what is being said, and we are looking into it. And to make it clear tonight, failure of Norlite to adhere to the fugitive dust plan and the things contained within it that accounts and causes an off-site issue of dust will be a violation of the DEC Title V permit. The facility will be held accountable for failure to adhere to that fugitive dust plan. Now, one thing I want to talk about tonight is DEC's response to fugitive dust concerns, and I'm going to get into this even more in the complaint section that I'm going to do next. But for DEC to respond to these fugitive dust issues, timely public complaints are imperative to resolve the issues that are being discussed with DEC. What I mean by timely public complaints is if you see something, if anyone sees something that lives in Saratoga sites or in the surrounding area, you need to say something. You can't rely on one person to make all the calls. Everyone that is seeing something should be calling the department and saying something. And if you're having an issue, if anyone in the public that's listening tonight is having an issue with dust or odor or a problem that you are concerned about your health or what you're breathing or what you're smelling or what's going on, the first step should be to rectify the problem, and the quickest way to rectify the problem would be to call Norlite and let them know that there is a problem and they need to do something about it. You can reach Norlite at 518-235-0401. You can do that 24 hours a day. To make that problem stop, make Norlite accountable and tell them that there's an issue. And at the same time, you should be calling DEC. Call the spill hotline. Call the response so that we know something is happening and we can respond to it. 1-800-457-7362. I cannot stress enough that we want to hear from the public. We want to hear from the people that are having complaints. We want to hear from you. If you're having an issue, call. Next slide. Since I've been looking at the fugitive dust plan, since DEC has been assessing the fugitive dust plan and the problems associated with the complaints that have been coming in recently, DEC staff, including myself, including the new on-site monitor, including support staff, we are on site. We're reevaluating the fugitive dust plan as it's written, and we're looking at things that could be potential sources of dust. The on-site monitor right now is reporting daily observations of all potential dust issues, not just dust issues happening. What he's looking at is what could be a concern. And he reaches out to myself, he reaches out to the Division of Material Management supervisor. He reaches out to other management in Region 4, and he says these are potential issues. So these are conversations before anything happens that we need to address, we need to have Norlite be on top of. So some of these potential dust-generating issues, and I'm not even talking about the ones that we actually see. I'm talking about the ones that could happen. We're addressing those immediately with Norlite staff. The on-site monitor has daily meetings with all Norlite staff, the operators, the management, the health and safety people, everyone. They are all in constant contact about things that could happen to prevent them from happening. If the new on-site monitor is seeing something that is creating a source of dust that could potentially leave the site and end up on Saratoga sites, he's immediately addressing that issue. He's immediately changing the way that the operation is handled to ensure, and he's also notifying Norlite, and that's part of the response to these dust issues, to reduce that potential for off-site dust impact. The other part of the dust that is being looked at, and I've seen concerns come in from the public. Again, the citizen scientists doing their job, looking at things and asking appropriate questions, is what does that dust consist of? So what Norlite does, what Norlite is required to do, is part of the dust, certain sources of the dust, they have to do monthly sampling. And they look at any metals content, they look at the contents of pollutants in it, and DEC can review that at any time. So I've requested that several times, and I always get it within the day usually. And we can see what's in the dust that is from one of the sources. We can see that dust at all times. And then there's the other piles of the clinker and the aggregate, and those are all also monitored. Norlite monitors everything there. So we can move on to that next slide. So what I want to talk about a little bit is some of the things that we've seen, and what has Norlite done to address some of the issues that the new on-site monitor, myself, and other staff has brought to their attention. So the purpose of this is to show you what has been being done in the last several months moving forward to address these dust concerns, because DEC is concerned hearing from the public what is going on. And these are some of the steps that we're taking to mitigate that immediately. So the DEC on-site monitor, as I said, one of the most important things is his reporting, his note-taking, and getting back to management, getting back to myself, getting back to materials management in Region 4. One of the things that has happened already is on the primary plant in the back. This is farther away from the Saratoga site's boundary, but in the back of the plant, behind their pollution control equipment, behind those towers, behind the stacks, there's water on everything to deal with the stone crushing, the stone moving, the finishing plant. There's water being sprayed at all times to suppress dust. What Norlite has done in the last few months is they've installed heat-traced permanent water lines on the primary plant. They've always had water on the plant. What they were doing for a while was they're using the water hookup on the truck to ensure that water was on it, and they've replaced all those water lines. And there's also a continuous line and source for a backup, the water truck to be hooked back up if there's a malfunction of those water pipes. So just one of the improvements, and we realize there's more improvements to be made. The point of this is just to show some of the things that we're doing and some of the progress being made. Some of the things, and as I talked about in the last presentation, and for those of you that haven't heard me talk about, the approach at addressing the fugitive dust and any problems and any concerns being reported to DEC is first determining the source or the greatest source of potential for the dust. What on that Norlite site could be causing the most problems? Seems to make sense to go after the worst problems first, and that's exactly what we're doing. Conveyor heights. You can see the conveyors. You can see them right from Saratoga sites. So the first thing we're looking at is fugitive dust from those, making sure the water lines are on, making sure drop height of the conveyors is appropriate, and making sure the conveyors aren't causing the dust. So if that is the source, what can we do to fix it? That's the discussions we're having and what we're looking into, how to best handle that source of dust. Another part that I don't even have on this slide is the on-site monitor he continuously monitors weather conditions. Very important. Wind speed, wind direction, moisture content in the air, moisture content in the soil on the ground, moisture content in those piles. Is it hot? Temperature? All those things drastically affect the potential for Norlite to cause an off-site dust concern. So what we're doing is every day when the monitor is on site looking at these things, taking his tours around and taking his tour around Saratoga sites, which he does several times a day, we're looking at the weather. And if we see something on site, we're corresponding that to the weather and what conditions in the weather are reaching a potential area of concern. So that's another thing we're doing is we're tightening down on the conditions in the area to see when that potential could occur and making sure more stringent operations are put in place at those times and making sure Norlite understands what we're looking at. It's a study that's being worked on. DC is assessing windbreak structures. So again, one of the things, can we prevent the wind from actually picking up some of the dust in that area? So can we build something? Can Norlite build something that will block the wind or redirect the wind so the dust remains on site? Heavy equipment operation. Another complaint that I've heard and another comments I've heard from different people is that dust is increased based on heavy equipment operation on site. When it's observed to be busy on the site, there's more concern and there's more dust coming off the site. That's what was reported to me. So one of the things addressing that comment specifically is the heavy equipment. That's what it looks like when it's busy. You see everything moving around up there. So when those things move around, when those loaders move around, when the trucks move around, that has the potential to create dust. What the on-site monitor has noticed is using different techniques and procedures that can be included and updated in the fugitive dust plan and required at all times. By using those techniques, drastically minimizes dust. Another way that we can immediately reduce dust. These are some of the things, and I'll say it again, we know there's more work to do. We're working on these things, and I'm just showing you what we're doing. The other thing, talking about using those techniques, using the procedures, wetting the roads down, having the water truck spray, not now it doesn't matter because there's snow everywhere, but making sure the Norlite staff is properly trained on the fugitive dust plan implementation on the site. So if the water goes out on a conveyor, that operator, that person that's in charge on that site, that worker, they need to be cognizant of that. They need to be looking to make sure that water's working. Because if it's not, if the water's not working, if something's being done improper and they're not following the plan and it causes off-site dust, and we're there to see that, and we get a complaint and we respond and that's the cause, that's a violation of the Title V permit, and Norlite's going to be held accountable to that. Move forward. All right, so improvements to the fugitive dust plan. This is imperative to making changes and making the situation better about the fugitive dust leaving the site and the complaints being received. So DC is going to require the new and updated fugitive dust plan to address all the findings of this ongoing evaluation that the new on-site monitor is undertaking right now, and that I'm helping with them and other staff is helping. So as this is being rewritten, the DEC on-site monitor is going to have an integral role in rewriting this plan. He's on site every day. He sees what's happening. He's making copious notes. He's made great observations on what can be done to improve things. And he's going to have an instrumental role in rewriting that fugitive dust plan based on what he's seen, based on those weather conditions, based on the walkthroughs of Saratoga sites and all the things that are happening right now. That fugitive dust plan, the one that is going to be rewritten, this is going to provide the on-site monitor with a stronger authority to ensure compliance with the plan and enforce with the plan if necessary. Again, noncompliance with the fugitive dust plan resulting in an off-site dust-related issue will be enforceable under DEC Title V permit. Going back to that first slide, you don't have to go back to it, but reviewing what I said in the beginning, if you see something, you need to say something. DEC relies on public complaints, relies on citizen scientists to bring issues to us that we can help resolve. So you need to call Norlite. You need to call DEC and give us the chance to be there and respond to events that can be considered a violation or can be considered something wrong with the fugitive dust plan that can be addressed. But the first thing you need to do, and I'll say it again, if you have a problem with a lot of dust coming off that site, don't sit there and breathe it. Call Norlite immediately and have them deal with the problem. Put Norlite on account, let Norlite know, and have them fix the problem immediately. And DEC will be there to respond to that. Next slide.
Thanks, Ben. We will pause here for questions, but I think it's safe to say that we're not suggesting that we need the residents to do the job of the monitor, and that's not what we're trying to convey with this. Obviously, our new on-site monitor is out there every day, stepping up, as Ben said, his work at the facility and surrounding that. But what helps our jobs is the complaints coming in, and I know folks have said over time that this has been a consistent recurring issue, but if you're only talking to each other and not talking to us, we can't create the record with which to hold the facility accountable. And that's what we're trying to convey with this. It's not to suggest that we're trying to put more emphasis on you doing more of our work. It's more that the more complaints that we have, the better able that we are to hold the facility accountable. And that's what we're trying to convey and trying to work together with the community on this to make sure that you have a good, solid pathway for communicating that to the officials who will make the changes happen. And as Ben walked through, we have been working to make a lot of these changes happen, and especially with our new monitor on the site, identifying the needs for changes, we're already working on that. And I think it's also safe to assume that a lot of this was ongoing prior to Mr. Walker coming out with his most recent research that he put out in the last week. And we had already been working towards assessing some of the things that Ben spoke about, stepping up our air monitoring as well, and doing some other work on the site to control dust, because we have heard that it is an issue. We do need more of those complaints to document those issues and, again, hold the facility accountable overall. So I know those are some of the questions that we were getting in the chat. We want to really turn this over again to folks on the phone first. So if you're on the phone and would like to ask a question, please hit *3 to raise your hand, and Regina will unmute your line. Regina, do we have any questions so far from folks on the phone?
Yep. First we have Joe Ritchie.
Thanks.
Hi. Well, first I just want to make a few statements in regards to my observations as being a resident in that area for 20 years. One is I have sent, and usually I send the photos 10 minutes, 30 minutes after I take them. DEC has a record of the photos in regards to the dust. And they also have a record of clearly what Dave Walker found from my windshield was volcanic glass, which you don't find anywhere else except for heat treatment. Second, I've actually tried calling Norlite myself, and the plant manager, the one I assume runs the show there, refused to talk to me when I spoke to him. And I was so confused about this when they're supposed to be transparent and helping out the community. And second, when you speak about the water on the piles, there's, at least during the summertime when it's warmer out, there are some sprinklers and piles way off site that you can see, but at the ones where are directly next to the fence line of Saratoga sites, they're bone dry. There's no water on them. Actually, the commissioner went over there himself, and he said there's no water on them. And when there was no snow and when it was warmer a few weeks ago, there was still no water on them. And then one more statement is that I find that the DEC's statements about Dave Walker's reporting last week to be very misleading. They call the findings very common to find in the air in the United States, but they fail to recognize that this is not common. Volcanic glass in this area is not common. So I just would like to politely ask the DEC to redact that statement because it's very dangerously misleading. And I guess a couple questions I have now. Who is the on-site monitor and what makes them qualified to be in this position? And clearly the last on-site monitor there was a little too cozy and he did not do what he was supposed to do in his job and let down the community. He let us all down. And what makes this on-site monitor qualified, and what's their name and number, and how we can build some sort of relationship with them?
Well, Joe, thanks for your questions. I think for your statement first, with regard to what we said in our statement, we worked with the Department of Health, and I know we have some of our colleagues from DOH on that could talk about this, but what we were responding to was what Mr. Walker put out in his findings with regard to quartz and silica. And what we do find, as our statement pointed out, that in the majority of air samples you collect, between 5 and 20% of the air samples contain similar elements. And what you need to really do is look at a quantitative study to see how much exactly is in those emissions in order to definitively pinpoint back to the Norlite facility. And that's what we're doing with the air quality monitoring that Ben spoke about. And what we really need to do is pinpoint, again, the process operations that are emitting the dust so that we can make the changes happen. And that's what we were trying to convey. It wasn't trying to be dismissive of his findings at all. It was trying to more say, this is how we as regulators need to evaluate this situation and look at the research. Again, in order to hold the facility accountable, we need different types of science to do that right. Just because there's presence of something does not necessarily directly equate to an issue. So that's why we need the right science in order to hold that facility accountable, and it's been outlined. That's what we're working towards right now. With regard to your on-site monitor, I know we have Tony Luisi on, and Joe, I think we did want to make a change with that monitor as we realized, and we continue to make changes to our monitoring program overall to better rotate them. It was something that the mayor had asked us to look into. It was something that we looked into as well, and we want to make sure that our monitoring staff are operating in the best interest of the community and the facilities that they're overseeing, and that's what we did to make those steps. With regard to the contact information, we are looking to evaluate getting that up there. We do want the monitor to stay focused on his facility that he's overseeing because that's the most important part of his job right now, and building the trust and confidence with the community through the experts that you have here with you tonight is really where we want you to focus on, because the more that you can interact with us, the better able that we are to oversee that facility, and we really want that monitor to be focused, and that's why we need the complaints coming into us. We can correlate and ground truth that with the monitor, and as Ben said, he is making regular trips throughout the community as part of the rounds that he's making on that site. So, Tony, is there anything else you wanted to add on that?
Thanks, Sean. No, I echo what you said regarding us further evaluating contact information for general public purposes for the monitor. It's imperative for us to be sure that the monitor is able to focus on his daily duties, but there's plenty of other regional staff who would be available on a moment's notice to answer questions, to take reports or concerns. And going back to Dr. Walker's studies, just to emphasize, we are taking that information seriously. That's why we are building a new air monitoring initiative, which will involve new sampler installations at the Saratoga sites. I think Ben will touch on some of this in his next presentation. So we want to make sure that we have all the facts and that those facts can guide our future decision making.
Thanks. I just wanted to say a couple more things. One is that when you take a look at the samples from Dave Walker from my windshield, I guess if you take very simple classes, you understand that these are from high temperature, they're just heat treated, I should say. Maybe Dave Walker can speak more on this or anybody else, but you can clearly see the difference between a normal silicate or quartz sample from a Norlite aggregate and thus Norlite dust. And I believe Dave Walker also mentioned, and others, that the EC already points out that this stuff comes from Norlite. So where's the enforcement action? Because clearly they're violating the permit. I mean, I have photos, I have videos, we have reports. So how much does it take for the DEC to go in and enforce this facility and say, you know what, you're actually doing a bad job. Here's $1 million fine, or here's this fine, instead of slaps on the wrist, it seems.
Well,
because the people in the community are not seeing any of these. When the fines go out, the people need to see, the communities also need to see what happens with these fines. It just goes into some sort of coffers, and the community also needs to start seeing these fines. But Norlite has clearly violated the permit, and nothing has been done yet. And the Fugitive Dust Plan hasn't been working.
All your evidence that you're providing in the department is what we're using to build our case. Again, as Tony said, the scientific research that we're doing now is using that to further pinpoint that and again, hold the facility accountable, because that is our goal overall in this, working on your behalf in the community. We did put information up, I believe, on the website about some of the past enforcement violations and where the penalties have gone, because there have been past environmental benefit projects. If that's not up there, we'll make sure that we provide some of that information to you so you can know what the facility has been required to do in the past. But obviously, you know, as we've said all along, we're not satisfied with what's going on, and we're using all the best scientific and analytical tools at our disposal to oversee this facility and make changes happen on your behalf, because that's our goal, and experts like Ben are the ones on the front lines of making those changes happen.
Well, thank you, and I'm just saying I'm not satisfied with what I'm breathing.
Yep, and that's why we're acting on your behalf day in and day out and doing the work that Ben spoke about here tonight. And I'm going to continue that, Joe. So keep relaying the concerns that you're seeing and the complaints. And again, to the rest of the residents on the phone here tonight, please also relay your concerns and complaints, because that is helpful to our case that we're building, and again, leads into the enforcement actions that we can take. So thanks, Joe. Regina, do we have any other call-in users?
Yep. Carrie Powell.
Hey, Carrie.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Ben, you just made a sort of comment that I didn't see on the slide that made me wonder. You said if there was a fugitive dust violation that impacted the general public, then there would be a violation. And I just wanted some clarity there. If the facility is violating the requirements of its fugitive dust plan, can you enforce it against them just because you can see that they're not spraying the piles or they aren't following the other measures, or do you have to connect that violation to an off-site exposure?
What creates a violation? What creates a violation under New York state law is when there is an impact to the public. So when things remain on site, when there's no effect on the public, unless it has something to do with the way they operate their emission control system or things like that. If there's not an off-site issue, if there's not an off-site problem, if they're not affecting anybody off-site with the dust that's created on there, because there's always going to be dust created on-site, then that's not a violation. What DEC needs to do to process a violation is they need to take evidence, and then we need to correlate that with something Norlite did that caused a problem, a dust problem, for the people at Saratoga sites or any other people in the area. That's what constitutes a violation, is when someone off-site is impacted by the actions that happened on-site by Norlite, or the inactions by Norlite.
Okay, and it's not possible to set things up so that some of those precautions that they have to take are practices that are set up to assure compliance with the requirement to control fugitive dust, and so at least they would have a violation of sort of a compliance assurance requirement in their permit?
So that's exactly the way that the fugitive dust plan will be structured as we're rewriting and updating it. It will be looked at more as conditions of the way they always have to operate. So if and operating correctly according to all these things we're looking at and assessing right now, all the things that are causing problems. By doing that, by operating in compliance with that fugitive dust plan, it should eliminate those possibilities. And then if something happens where an offsite is affected and we see that, then that is a violation. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but the way that it's being rewritten is it's a permit with conditions that they have to operate by. And if they're not, it's a violation if it causes offsite impact.
So even after you rework the plan and issue the new Title V permit, they still aren't violating anything if they don't follow the fugitive dust control plan. It's only if they aren't following it and you also happen to observe that when they have dust migrating off-site.
New York state law is currently written that it has to be impacted off-site to be a violation.
So I'm gathering from your request for people to be more vigilant about reporting off-site exposures that you're trying to get help so that you can build that case, because currently you observe violation, well, I don't even know what to call them, but failure to follow the fugitive dust control plan, but you can't enforce until you get that correlation of what's happening on a particular day.
We want to make sure that we have all the facts. That's the reason why we're making that ask of the public. Correct.
It's
right,
so I can
you.
collect evidence of those type of things.
Thank you.
Thank you. Regina, do we have any other call-in users with their hands up?
Yep. Philip Oswald.
Hey, Philip.
Hey, Sean. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to ask a question. So I had two questions. The first is relatively simple. Earlier this week on Monday, I believe, the DEC made available a significant amount of permit documents for the several permits that Norlite has. And I had a question. There's a document titled Fugitive Dust Plan that's dated October of 2014. And I was just wondering if, and that dust plan was in the folder for the mine lands reclamation permit. I was wondering if is that the same document that's referenced as the fugitive dust control plan in the Title V permit, or are there two different fugitive dust plans for each permit?
It's the same plan.
Great, thanks. And the second question, I was wondering if you were able to comment on any of the monitoring data that you are requesting and receiving from Norlite. Is that consistent with any of the recent findings from Dr. Walker when he tested the dust?
I'm about to get into that in my next section.
So stay tuned, I'll say, for a few moments. Before we move on to that, though, Regina, do we have anyone else with their hand up right now that would like to ask a question?
Yep. We have four more with their hands up. We have Dave P.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Hey, Dave.
Oh, he just muted himself. Dave, you're there now.
Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you, Dave.
Okay, great. So with all this, the way that you're framing it, it's as though you're just looking forward, like you're setting permit structures, and then you're looking potentially for permit violations, but of course you're hoping that they don't violate the permits. And the problem that I think collectively we have with that is that it's as though history does not exist. It's as though this fugitive dust problem has not been in existence since at least the late 80s. And if you look at any of the documentation that's available on the Norlite website, it obviously has. And they have violated it over and over and over again. And, the stuff that Dave Walker brought to your attention is common sense material. I mean, those SPDES sheets about the threat of the aggregate, it's just so obvious. And we just have an enormous problem with this stance that the DEC is taking, as though, all right, we're going to start proving stuff now. It's almost ridiculous, and I don't understand, having looked through those documents as I have in the last few weeks, how you can continue to operate this way.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And obviously, we have to look forward, obviously looking back at the course and track record, and then obviously making the changes that we all collectively need to see in this facility. And our intention here is to continue to do that directly with you and the community at large, and obviously working with the new mayor and everyone. We're trying to restore that confidence that we are on your side. And
but what about all the people who have suffered health impacts? What about all the people who have already suffered health impacts? What about all the people who lived at Saratoga sites for 30 years and breathed this day in, day out? And what about, as is detailed in that fugitive dust plan from 1990 and 1995 and 2001 and the various other dates? What about when Norlite was using what the Bevel Amendment allows them and taking the particulate matter out of the cyclone, out of the baghouse, mixing it in with the aggregate in that finishing area that is adjacent to Saratoga sites? What about that? What about the health impacts that have surely come from that? How can the state of New York not immediately, first of all, close down the plant and then also initiate a thorough health review of the people who lived in that area for the last 30 years? How can you, as humans, do this?
Yeah, Dave, and can have Tony talk about the health studies that we are requiring the facility to do and undertaking. Obviously, we've got DOH professionals on the phone who can chime in about some of that history as well. And again, we share the concerns, and that's why we're acting in the ways that we are. And we're performing the right research, again, to hold the facility accountable, because we hear you loud and clear, and we're not satisfied with what they've been doing, and we want to make sure that changes are made and that you're protected, because that is our goal. And we do look at the case history, and we do look at this, and we have to make changes in real time, and that's what we're done. And throughout the last year, you've witnessed a systematic ratcheting down of our oversight of this facility and making sure that changes are being made. And that commitment to you is continuing, and that's really our goal by hosting these public forums to give you an eyes wide open view of exactly how we approach this, how we work with you to make changes, how we can help you to help us make those changes as well. And we are here for you. So, Tony, is there anything you want to add? I know we've talked before about some of the health studies that we're requiring, but do you want to just mention that?
Yeah, I'll just remind everyone, back in July when we received the applications on the air permit and the hazardous waste permit, we reviewed them, and shortly thereafter in August issued a notice of incomplete application to the facility that specified various submissions that we're going to require from the facility before any final decision making on the pending applications. Among those submissions are a comprehensive human health and ecological risk assessment, as well as a community health outcome data report. We're working hand in hand with the Department of Health, and EPA is also reviewing the first draft protocols that the facility has submitted to us back in December. That will be an ongoing process that will involve all three regulatory agencies with close look at these health concerns to ensure that DEC is fully informed of all relevant facts and data before any final decisions are made. In addition, as part of the upcoming air monitoring initiative, we will continue to work hand in hand with DOH because we know that the community has health complaints and concerns relating to this facility, and we're committed to making sure that those questions are answered.
So thank you, Dave, for those questions and comments. Again, there's some information on the DOH's website as well with regard to some of the previous data and maps that they've done. But again, this is what we are actively working on with you, and we'll continue to keep you updated as this moves forward. Regina, do we have anyone else who'd like to ask questions?
Yep. Steve Pierce?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Thanks for doing this tonight. Long day for you guys. I work in North Troy, about a mile from the plant. I've been working there for 15 years. And I think that people in Troy have an illusion that something about the Hudson River protects them from what's affecting the people at Saratoga sites and the people closer. But obviously it doesn't. I've been working there for 15 years. I've been living on the Rensselaer Plateau for 25, and I can see the Norlite stack from my house. So I see it. It's obvious what's happening. I started looking into this a little bit a couple of years ago, and I looked at all the online news articles I could find, and I've looked at it more since this has been heating up in the last year. And it only goes back about to the 80s online. Most of the other records are, are paper records that are hard to get at now during the pandemic. But it's pretty obvious from looking at the record that anybody can see, going through newspaper articles, that DEC and its predecessors have been playing whack-a-mole with this plant for, at least the last 40 years and longer than that. And what everybody's talking about here is just common sense. I mean, it's just common sense. You're talking about the standards that are allowed for mercury and other dangerous chemicals and materials, but those aren't safe levels. Those are just allowable levels. There shouldn't be any. And just the obvious thing that people would come to if they weren't encumbered by graduate degrees and professional niceties that make it impossible to talk about just common sense is you don't burn hazardous waste in the middle of a town. You don't burn waste 100 feet away from families who are trying to raise kids. You just don't do it. You don't need an advanced degree for that. It's common sense. So what would it take to get DEC to help us, the neighbors, the downwinders, to just apply some common sense to this situation and close the plant down? Under what circumstances can DEC close the plant down, or the state of New York? What can we do to help you do that? Because that's common sense. They shouldn't be there.
Steve, appreciate those comments. And Tony, I didn't mean to cut you off. You were going to jump in, but obviously everything you're hearing tonight is exactly the steps that the state is taking to evaluate those options and take those actions.
No, that's not obvious at all. What's obvious is you're taking steps that will allow them to continue operating. It's clearly obvious that you're doing that now, and you've been doing it for the entire time you've been regulating the plant. But I'm talking about taking a common sense perspective. Don't burn dangerous stuff right next to somebody's house. I mean, this is common knowledge where I live. If there's a neighbor burning tires next door, you call the police, they make them stop. It's common sense. You're not trying to shut them down. You're trying to keep them operating. So how do we shut them down? What can DEC do to help us? I know this is a tough question. You're working within a regulatory framework, state law, and so forth. Is there anything that can be done to just look at the situation and shut them down? Can it be done? Can they be shut down?
What we are doing is making sure that we are creating, compiling, and following the best available science and applying and enforcing all applicable legal requirements. As a regulatory entity, that's our mission. That's what we have been doing, but I can assure you that's what we will continue to do.
Is there anybody with the power to shut them down? How could it be done?
As a legal matter, we can't answer that question tonight. We know that's frustrating for many people, but that's not a question we can answer tonight.
Yeah, but, Steve, I think it's suffice it to say, the more that the community can bring these complaints to our attention and it helps us create the record, that helps us build the case and take further actions. And that's one of the messages we want to convey tonight, is that we're here to work with you to do that and make those changes happen. Again, that's why we're treating the permits as new permits, to give the community a greater say and chance to, again, have eyes wide open on this and really help us determine whether or not these permits should be granted. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later on in the process tonight as part of the future presentations that we'll have. But that's, all the steps that we are taking. And we hear those concerns loud and clear. And again, we hope to work with the community to address those moving forward and to show you exactly how we're building cases to make further changes in this facility.
Okay, well,
I
appreciate that response, and I'll just follow up very quickly, because you said something that I was going to ask you about. This has come up before. You're treating these as new permits. Would a new facility like this be allowed to site in the middle of a city in New York State?
Well, any new facility that would want to site somewhere would go through a similar process to what's going on right now, and we would evaluate whether or not they would be eligible for permits. And those are the processes that the state has.
So they're not grandfathered. There's no consideration for the fact that they have all these sunk investments and so forth. They're starting as though they were starting new in a virgin site and in the middle of a community in the state capital.
No, that's not what we're doing. We're treating the permits as new, but it's an existing facility. We're not. Yeah. We can't consider a facility that has been there for several decades to be a new facility for purposes of applying the siting requirements. That's not what we are legally able to do.
Okay. I appreciate that clarification because it doesn't sound like that when you say you're treating it as a new application or a new permit. It's a little bit more complicated than that. You really can't just treat them. I mean, obviously this wouldn't be allowed now, but you can't apply that standard to them now.
Thank you, Steve, for your comments and questions there. Regina, do we have anyone else at present who would like to ask questions?
Yep, David Walker.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
I wondered if we were still on the same page here. I sort of thought that there wasn't too much pushback to the idea that Joe Ritchie's glass actually comes out of Norlite. Could you give me a straight answer about whether we agree? I agree with your website, which tells me that I look at the dust that's coming onto Joe Ritchie's windshield, and it's a dead ringer for what comes out of the aggregate piles of Norlite. So are we agreed on that or not?
The purpose of our new air monitoring initiative is to confirm not only what appears from your research to be heat-treated particles, but also the particle size from the sampling and whether they're in the respirable range. So I don't believe there's a large disconnect, but there's more work to be done.
Okay, so that's not a definite, you agree with your own website, it's you're working on it, is that correct?
We are absolutely working on it, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I don't want to steal too much of Ben's thunder, but he is going to get to that next in the presentation here. So we'll do one more question, Regina, and then we'll continue on with the rest of Ben's presentation tonight.
Okay. I have a call-in user. I can't see your phone number. It's just coming up as zeros.
I have a question. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep, go ahead, Ed.
Oh, okay. You said if we I'm getting a feedback here.
If Tony and others, please just go on mute, that may help with that. Or Ed, if you're listening through your computer and on your phone, if you turn your speakers off, that may help.
Okay. You said if I heard anything to tell the DEC. I've been telling DEC for 20, 30, 40 years. When you had your monitor over there, his name was Joe. I had his number right next to my phone. I used to call him daily, weekly, after I got worn out. I told him, Joe, dust is coming from that big pile you got there. I said, Joe, my attic is full of dust. It's Norlite dust. Nothing was ever done. Now, what am I supposed to do on something like that? Now, let me tell you, all these years I've been saying that dust is in my attic. Just lately, a gentleman, Mr. Walker, took tests or had tests done in my attic. I'm afraid what I'm seeing on there. This stuff is 8 feet above my head. I'm living with it 365 days a year. This stuff is only found in volcanic matter or something that went through real high test burning. Who's going to take care of that dust in my attic? Are you going to come over and take it out of here? If I drove my car up where it says no trespassing, private property, if I drove that on Norlite property and he'd say, get your vehicle off of my property, you can't be here. Well, I'm telling them, get their property that's up in my attic out of my attic. Do you hear me?
Yep, Ed, we can hear you. And,
well, I've been saying this for 30 years.
No,
you're saying notify you.
Yes, and
you're notified. You're notified right now. I want somebody from DEC to come over here and take tests out of my attic. And if that is toxic, if that is found to be razor sharp glass that I'm breathing every time I have to go up my attic, I got to put a mask on. Is that right?
Ed, I know
it is not right. And you wear people down. That's what you do. You wear them down. That's what happened all these years. You say, I'll do it, I'll do it, I'll do it. Just like the last meeting. The last meeting we had, I asked you, can you cover up that pile of dirt that's aggregate that's at Norlite? You said you see me at the next meeting. You'd have an answer for me. I said, can that be covered up like the salt is across from the arsenal in Waterville? Over in Troy there's a big pile and it's covered up. I said, can that be done at Norlite? Why don't you cover that pile up? So I'll ask you now. Why isn't that pile covered up?
Yep, thanks, Ed. As Ben pointed out earlier in the presentation this evening, we're trying to pinpoint exactly the sources of the dust, and we're evaluating a lot of different changes that could happen to really address those dust migrations that you're potentially seeing. And we obviously appreciate your complaints being submitted to DEC. That is exactly what we need to happen. And I won't steal too much of Ben's thunder here because I know he's going to get into citizen complaints in the next presentation. So I think for now, we'll just move into that because he may address some of those questions in the next presentation. So Regina, we'll hold questions for now and turn this back over to Ben to walk through the next part of this presentation, which talks about complaints.
Okay.
Take it back over.
All right, so what I'm going to do in this section, which is shorter than the others, is I'm going to go over some of the complaints received. Actually, I'm going to go over all the complaints received since the November 24th event. And why I'm choosing to start with the November 24th event is the first time that I've been involved in sampling in response to a complaint, and how we've progressed from November 24th to this point. Just because there's been questions about that event, that complaint that was called in that I responded to and sampled, we're going to start there just for conversation purposes of what the last gentleman was just talking about, and also what our citizen scientist was talking about, Mr. Walker, and the conversations that we've been having with the public and internally in DEC, just to show you what's going on and how these complaints work. So November 24th, DEC received a dust complaint saying that that dust from Norlite was coming off-site, depositing on Saratoga sites. Our response to that was to take samples all over Saratoga sites, pretty much every location that we could think of, inside the courtyard, along the fence line, in front of Saratoga sites on the roadside. We took several samples, and what we were doing is just looking what was in this, what was in the sample. On December 14th and 15th, DEC staff was back at Saratoga sites taking a different type of sample to compare the two types of samples that were taken. And both of those, so results from the November sampling, this is the one that I was actually at and witnessed, those sampling results were determined to be inconclusive due to the isopropyl alcohol wipe sampling procedure being used. Now, being inconclusive means we needed to take the December 14th and 15th samples to compare those two results. So as a result of making sure that isopropyl alcohol on the wipe didn't affect the sample, this is just science and proving evidence and proving what happened and disproving any assumptions that can be made. We wanted to disprove or prove that the sampling technique could have changed it, could have changed the sample results. So what DEC decided to do what the right scientific thing to do is take another sample in a different method and compare them. So dust sampling was taken again on December 14th and 15th using a different sampling technique, different sampling procedure. So using that alternate procedure and using microscopy and other analyzation methods, we are seeing exactly what Mr. Walker's talking about with heat-treated materials. And what we continue to do while looking at things like that is, how do they get there? The sources that I talked about earlier with the Fugitive Dust Plan. And what do we do to continue to gather that evidence we need from these complaints? I just answered a question earlier about what constitutes a violation of that Fugitive Dust Plan. This is the things that I have to use to collect evidence, is complaints, responding to complaints, collecting samples, analyzing those samples, making sure those samples will hold up if I have to process a violation. So this is the science that goes behind responding to a complaint and what we need in getting those complaints from the public. This is how the response works. This is how moving forward in making an order or a violation or changing something, this is how it works. I respond to complaints and I collect evidence. So as I said, we saw in the dust, we saw the similar things to what Mr. Walker was saying, that we're not refuting what he's saying in there about heat treatment. So you can move on to that next slide. The continued complaints. So the only one complaint that I'm talking, and I'm listing just so everyone understands that's listening right now, I'm listing all the complaints that I've received since November 24th. The next complaint that came in was December 24th. That complaint was regarding black speckles in the snow. So that was the fresh. Also, going back to that November 24th sample, the reason why we couldn't do another sampling technique immediately after that is there was a torrential downpour after. And you don't want to go sample when everything was just washed away. So by December 14th and 15th, there would have been a collection to take a sample. So there's conditions and there's things that are happening, which when you're collecting evidence and looking at samples and things like that, the rain was a big factor in not getting back there immediately because all the dust was washed away right after we took those initial November 24th samples. So as I said, the next complaint that was received by the department was December 24th, a month later, that regarded black speckles in the snow, the fresh snow. The on-site monitor was at the site. We looked inside the courtyard. We looked at along the train tracks, along the fence line. We looked in front. Indeed, there is dark speckles in the snow. When we were looking in unrelated areas, there's black speckles in the snow in all areas. Now, the part why I'm saying this is witnessing an off-site event. As those black speckles are being deposited, as you're seeing a dust coming off the site, that's the kind of thing you want to sample. You see dust coming off the site, you know that's what you're sampling. That's good evidence. So to sample that in the snow, also you have the water, which creates a problem taking that sample. But again, we're there, document, and it's part of the record. So that complaint being called in is making a record. That's the point of me putting that there and talking about this, is as people in the public call in complaints, there is a record being formulated, and you're looking at the record. You're looking at the record of complaints. January 15th was the next complaint. That regarded black soot on a car and house. Same complaint. This is all same complaint. There's pinkish smoke coming from the stacks and the loud alarms occurring over the past week. So what happened with that complaint is DEC didn't actually receive that complaint right away. The complaint wasn't given to DEC initially. So it took a while to get to DEC. And at that point, a lot of weather conditions happen, and you can't respond to an event that just happened a week later. The other part of receiving that specific complaint, and if it comes in through email or someone calls in a complaint and leaves a message, if we don't have an address if we don't have a telephone number, if we don't have those methods to contact you immediately or go to the site and know those facts to respond, we can't respond. So getting back in touch with a complainant is important. We need that. If you're leaving a message or you're sending an email, contact number and a location of the incident, where you're at, those are important for us to respond to. We have to know the location of where you're at and where you're saying the problem is if we're going to respond to it. We did end up calling that complainant back. We talked about the issue. And again, documentation of a complaint. We couldn't respond to that one because we didn't talk to them for a long time, and they didn't call back. Follow-up, January 25th, another complaint. That's the next complaint. It was a 4 p.m. This one was much better. This complaint, I'm going to talk about this specifically and why it's so good, what happened with this, and how the department can use it and what can be done better in reporting something. 4 p.m., there was a dust event. It was reported around 9 p.m. I'm looking at the emails, the email chain of the complaint. And the follow-up with the complainant was initiated the very next morning. By the time the complainant was contacted was the following afternoon, and we had significant snowfall that day. So we had like 6 inches of snowfall. With that complaint, there was a video. And the video with that complaint demonstrated very clearly of what the complainant was trying to show. So those things like videos, timestamps. What would have been nice is permission to sample the vehicle immediately, because I can't just go on someone's private property and take samples without permission every single time you call in a complaint. That would have been a nice thing to respond to, but we couldn't get in touch with that complainant until the following afternoon after snowfall. But again, that created a document, that created pictures, that created a video that goes into a record to further evaluate potential violations occurring. My point of talking about this is that timely complaint and then DEC being able to respond. And we can move ahead. So part of the sampling, DEC taking the November 24th and then the December 14th and 15th sample, talking to people like Mr. Walker, citizen scientists. This is the stuff we use to be able to allocate resources for additional monitoring. So we're clearly showing a problem through the complaints, through what we're seeing, through DEC samples, response to events, and now what we're going to do moving forward to more continuously look at things and dust events as they're occurring without having to be on site all the time is we are going to move into fixed air monitoring stations being installed at Saratoga sites. So on site, I was on site today with a monitor walking through and looking for the best areas on Saratoga sites to set up monitors like this. And in doing those and making that determination, we look at these complaints. We look at those locations that you're talking about. We look where your car is. We look where the dust has the biggest impact, and that's how we assess where we're going to put these things to monitor and get the best data and the best evidence we have to make a change and to move forward with any potential violations. So the other part of monitoring, we're going to have those fixed monitoring stations looking at the particulate. What that will do is that will give us a particulate filter that we can bring back, we can weigh, and we can analyze, and without a doubt say what it is. At the same time, the DEC monitor will be trained on the use and given a handheld particulate monitoring device. What that allows us to do is real time, when the DEC monitor is just going about his normal day in the site on Saratoga sites doing his walkthroughs, even if he's seeing on-site dust, it allows him to use a monitor to collect a sample. That would be called a source sample. We evaluate source samples against complaint samples to show evidence. It's the same thing. That's what that's about. All those samples from both types of collection devices, they're going to be used to analyze exactly like I said. It will be on a frequent basis. we'll be collecting that, and we'll be analyzing, and we'll create another record of all the monitoring. And that data can be used by the Department of Health to determine potential health impacts from what we're seeing and what we're actually monitoring and sampling. So that will be used by the Department of Health, and I'm not going to speak for them, but how they use that, they can speak for themselves. So we can move forward. The other question that DEC clearly understands there's going to be questions about, and there was complaints. This was the only other complaint received since November 24th, was on January 18th. Norlite had a fire, and we received complaints. We received pictures of the black smoke. We know what happened. The short of it, the investigation is ongoing. What's happening is Norlite has to assess what occurred to cause that problem. They are pulling apart different parts of the plant to inspect and evaluate what exactly happened and what caused the leak of that LLGF, the hazardous waste fuel. What we can tell you at this point is that due to the leak in the piping that went to the kilns, there was a specific amount which will still be reported. We're waiting for actual amounts, so I'm not going to specify actual amounts. We can say in the hundreds of gallons, a couple hundred gallons. It's approximate right now. We'll get a final report later, and that will be released. That was released on the outside of the kiln. It reached an area that was near ignition, an ignition source, meaning something that's hot enough to catch it on fire. The duration of that fire from the City of Cohoes Fire Company that put it out was around 11 minutes. The fire burnt extremely hot. It pushed that smoke right up, and as from what I'm hearing from the fire department and other witnesses to this, the event was very quick. It's not something that lingered. It's not something that smoldered. It went up quick, and it was hazardous waste. There's nobody denying or saying that it wasn't. What they did with that, after putting the fire out, Norlite was required to remediate that site. So we had staff on site immediately. The spill staff was there. They responded to that emergency. And City of Cohoes, as I said, put the fire out. So the material, this was outside of the building. Where the firefighting company put that out, all that material, soil, rocks, everything was collected. Any of the free product was collected, and it was put into containers for hazardous waste. It is not being put back into the equalization tanks for being refed into the kilns. It is being stored currently in the storage area at Norlite in containers, and Norlite will determine where that goes off-site to be stored or to be treated or to be put permanently. It will not be used at Norlite for fuel, and it will not be stored permanently at Norlite. So currently that is what we know. As I said, there will be a final report after Norlite assesses and gives a root cause analysis to the problem. And DEC will continue ongoing investigations into the cause and remedies to that problem. And we can move on. Now, I'm not going to harp on it again because I've already did that in my fugitive dust complaint. But going on and moving forward with these complaints, if you see something, smell something, you need to say something. And if you've, in the past, as the last gentleman said, make your calls now. Start making your calls again if you're seeing something or saying something. The first thing that anybody that is experiencing a problem with dust, if you're breathing dust, if you're getting a terrible odor, first thing you should do to remedy that, because you don't want to sit and wait for a response and breathe that, you should call Norlite, 518-235-0401. And Norlite is responsible to address that problem immediately. At the same time, the timely public complaints, as I spoke about, call DEC, and we can respond and we can evaluate that problem. We don't want you sitting there in the problem. The first thing you should do is call Norlite. To call DEC to report, we encourage you to call the spill hotline immediately with any of those significant odors, dust, or other events. And the hotline will immediately notify the appropriate DEC staff, whether it be spills or if it's during the day. It could be me, it could be the on-site monitor. It also creates a record. Right now, I just showed you the record with about 6 complaints or so from November 24th. The record's important in collecting evidence and moving forward. And those complaints allows DEC to timely respond and collect that evidence that I'm talking about and show what this is and show what the problem is. So call that DEC hotline, 1-800-457-7362. And that's also, I'm ready for questions about anything.
Ben, can you guys hear me okay, by the way?
I'm sorry, what?
Can you hear me? Okay, good. I had to switch computers here for a sec. So thanks. And one thing I just wanted to clarify, Ben, but I think you did a good job of it. Earlier on when I said pinpoint the source, I was mainly speaking about pinpointing the on-site source of the dust. So there are many different process operations, from the piles to the other items that Ben spoke about. And what I was saying is our research has been outlined and articulated more eloquently than me, is that we are working to pinpoint the exact source on the site so that we can make actions happen. So just wanted that quick clarification. I know there's been some other back and forth in the chat, but we'll open it up to questions now. So Regina, is anyone on the phone? Again, hit *3 if you'd like to raise your hand, and we'll go from there.
All right. Alexis Goldsmith.
Hey, Alexis.
Hey there. Can you go back to the previous slide just real quick, because I didn't get a chance to write down all that information, but I do have a question. So in my mind, from what I understand, there was a hazardous waste spill of hundreds of gallons of fuels and then an open fire. And in my mind, an open fire is a worst case condition. You have that open hazardous waste spill and then the fire, which didn't reach the temperatures needed for the hazardous chemicals to be destroyed, didn't have the emissions, the containment mechanisms to keep the pollutants from getting out into the environment. So what do we know about what was spilled and what were the resulting emissions? And what enforcement action will DEC be taking against Norlite for this spill and this fire?
Sure. Part of that investigation, as Ben said, is ongoing. But Ben, do you want to talk about anything more specifically that you can say?
I can't get into that kind of deep. That's part of the investigation. So as we're reviewing, as whatever divisions are applicable to this incident are reviewing things, until that report is finalized, until something happens and everything is final, it's not something we discuss openly with the public, as is like police work.
Yeah, so Alexis, we're taking the situation very seriously, and obviously we will be moving forward as we get additional evidence and data back that we can act on. But we're very much in the discovery phase, and that's continuing. Okay. And we'll definitely share the results as they become available.
Thank you. I just have one more comment, and that is that there was a lingering smell. The air smelled like magic markers or like paint at the site, and that lingered for hours after the fire. And we called the DEC spill hotline, and they told us that there had already been a complaint, and there was already a complaint number, and that they weren't going to take another complaint. So that was confusing. So we didn't get a chance to lodge a formal complaint about that smell. But I want to thank Mayor Keeler for trying to move these families from Saratoga site. I am deeply disturbed that it's easier to find the political will and honesty to displace 70 families for their own safety than it is to close Norlite. There's been comments in the chat about environmental discrimination, and I want to point out that Saratoga Sites is an environmental justice zone, and that is because these families have to leave, but Norlite gets to stay. This is an international facility that has the ability to regularly pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in fines for exceeding their permits. The families that live at Saratoga sites don't have enough money to move on their own. So why is it that the families have to leave, but Norlite gets to stay? Why is it that we have to prove that Norlite is doing something wrong and allow them to continue operating while we prove they're doing something wrong? Why is it that we don't close them first and then prove they're safe? Why? It's so backwards.
No, Alexis, obviously appreciate those comments, and it's something that we are taking to heart as we evaluate the actions that we're outlining here, and we continue to work very closely with the mayor, the housing authority, and others on evaluating those actions in the context of what DEC is regulatory and legally allowed to do. Again, we work with the DOH and we work with other agencies as well on these important issues, and we hear loud and clear the concerns that you and others in the community are raising, and obviously taking them very seriously and working together collectively on this moving forward, because that is our goal to you and the other community members, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
Okay, please hear this loud and clear, because this is how you can work with us. Shut Norlite down until the fugitive dust is addressed. You're the regulatory agency, and this is affecting people's health and well-being now. We don't have time for an ongoing process and a study that will take months and years. You need to immediately cover the piles and the conveyor belt. I mean, you say you're working with us and you hear us, but you don't live here and you're not going through the emotional trauma that is living next to this site. You have parents who are in tears because they're worried about their children. You have grandparents who have mesothelioma and all kinds of lung diseases. I mean, it's traumatic, it's emotionally taxing, and it's compounding the environmental injustice of the fact that these families don't have enough money to leave. And 50,000 people live a mile downwind in Troy, New York. I mean, they're being affected too. So I don't understand why it is that you have to get all this data about how bad they are before you can shut them down but allow them to continue to operate. It just doesn't make sense. Please hear us. Shut this down until the dust is dealt with.
Thanks, Alexis. And the research that we're doing now that Ben outlined isn't going to take, years to collect and conduct. We're rapidly engaging on that because we hear these concerns loud and clear. We're building the case, and further changes are going to happen, and we'll continue to keep you posted as that occurs and rolls out. So appreciate those comments, and that's why we're holding these forums, and that's why we're continuing the conversation going with you and others so that you can see exactly how seriously we're taking this and the steps that we're taking overall. So thank you. Regina, do we have anyone else on the phone that would like to ask a question?
Yep. John McDonald just raised his hand, so I'm going to unmute his right now.
Sure. Assemblyman, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
I'm good, Sean. How are you?
Great.
So I think I just want to make a statement first, and then I have a question. And the statement's really for everybody. In the past, when renewals have come up, the opportunities to have these type of forums were not as prevalent. I think that although for those who are just tuning in or who have just been following this for the last couple of years, I think there's more resources that are going to be involved in this review. I think there's an opportunity to really, if this permit is to be renewed, that there's an opportunity to really put greater accountability and transparency. I've heard the word common sense many times tonight, and you're right. There are some, I think, common sense solutions that we should be working for if the permit's going to be renewed. But I just want to share with folks that, because, and as Alexis had mentioned, this is an environmental justice zone, and this is why it's getting a much greater scrutiny, which I think, regardless of what the outcome is really the right approach to take. And I'm glad that we're doing it. We're required to do it. Let's not be Pollyannish about this. But I think, if anything, it gives us an opportunity to know a lot more about how Norlite operates, what is or what is not coming off the site. And to be honest with you, Joe Ritchie has been very kind to share with me the Dust Bowl video the black snow that literally melted the next morning. That was amazing to me. Talk about the school of bad timing. So, there is good information. And I will say this because I know it was said in good intent by Ben. Unfortunately, yes, as much as it shouldn't be the job and responsibility of the residents to be calling DEC, unfortunately, you're the ones who are there the majority of the time, because you know damn well if a DEC truck was parked there all day long, nothing would happen. And that's just unfortunate. This has gone on with the Colony landfill for years. It's going on with the Dunn landfill over in Rensselaer. It's going on with Ezra Prentice in the south end of Albany. And yes, we're going to have to work together to be extra vigilant in regards to what is going on at Norlite. So as much as I know that's not what people want to hear, I appreciate their anticipated cooperation. I am interested, and I don't know if there'll be a map at some point of where the monitors are going to be placed. And I'm hoping it's not going to be just at the fence of Saratoga Sites and Norlite, because I think I heard Ed Sokol, I think he was echoing throughout his conversation. I think we need to be mindful that this is, as much as Joe and the residents of Saratoga Sites have every right to be complaining, this is not just a Saratoga Sites issue. So I hope that we can be thoughtful on a science basis of where monitoring would be. And I guess, and this is the delicate question, so this is the question and I'll be done. And it's only because of the fact that Joe sent that video of that dust storm, which was very clear where it was coming from. There was no question where it was coming from. Does DEC ever deploy video cameras as well on the site? So that way it's not looking at the property of the residents, but looking at the site. And I just throw that out there as just another helpful tool to help us really get an understanding of what's going on with that facility. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. I obviously want to talk to the experts about that with regard to that. Obviously an interesting question and something that we'll look into and evaluate something like that. Ben, I know you talked a little bit about where we were going to be placing the equipment, and primarily we're starting near the facility in order to pinpoint some of that, and again, with the most complaints that we have, getting the best data that we can right away. But do you want to talk about a little bit more on our placement of the monitoring equipment and what went into that?
Yep. So what I was doing today, I was on site this morning at Norlite with a monitor, and part of going through and looking at the topography or the layout, how everything works, elevations and all that, we want to place those stationary samplers. We want to place them in the highest concentration area. So to explain that further, I mean, this is great detail, but where we're looking at is where the most dust is coming off the site. And where we look at that right now is going to be near the fence line. And the reason you want to put those samplers there is the volume of air that they're pulling in, that will collect the most types of particulate. It will get a broad scan of everything, including the fines and the heavies and everything we want to look at to make a full analysis. So putting those near the fence line right now, that's the reason why we're originally choosing those. Also, I mean, you're asking a question about throwing more at it. We're allocating the resources we have at it right now. So we only have so many samplers, and we have many areas in the state where these samplers go to. So everything that we have available is going. It's going there. And as far as purchasing more, I mean, that's another issue with everything. But everything that we have available in the Air Resources Department to go, it's going. We have the handhelds that are going to be there. We have the stationary sources, and if things pop up, things being more sampling devices that we can use that will actually do things, we're gonna throw those at it too.
Yeah, we're moving as quickly as we can on this, and that's why we wanted to start immediately. Where the concerns were coming from mostly, to get that comprehensive look, as Ben just articulated, of what we're doing, and then we're going to continue to evaluate as we get the data back and as we evaluate it and move forward from there.
And although it might not be of interest to everybody, it might be interest to some to know exactly where they are when you have a map done or something. just once again,
Sure.
More information for certain people.
Yep.
They'll find it informative. Other people won't really care. But overall, I think the more that you can share publicly, I think is the better informed the public will be.
Definitely, and that's part of our goal here, and we want, again, eyes wide open on everything that we're doing and where things are going and working directly with you. That's why these complaints and concerns and ideas tonight that are being offered are helpful, and it goes into our evaluation so to make sure that we're doing this right on the community's behalf. Thanks for joining us tonight, Assemblyman. I know we've got a few more questions, Regina, and we do have some more presentations to get to tonight. I know the hour is getting late, but recognizing that folks wanted to hear from our water folks, we do have presentations lined up from them next. But Regina, do we have anyone else who wanted to ask a question at this point?
Diana, do you want to ask your questions now?
Yes, hi. I've got a couple of quick questions. Ben, what method are you using to analyze the particulate matter?
Oh, I'm not a chemist, but hold on a second. I'm waiting for that answer to come in from one of the side people.
Usually PM 2.5, 4, or 10.
So we'll be using microscopy, and we will be analyzing, I'm pretty sure, for both PM10 and down to 2.5 and lower.
Okay, from 10 on down. And so, Tony, what do you consider respirable versus inhalable? And are you only looking at respirable particles with regards to regulations and guidelines?
I'm sorry, was that addressed to me?
Yes. Yes, Mr. Luisi.
Sure. I would defer to our air technical expertise for that type of question. I know that they are looking at the respirable range. We will be looking at all particle sizes, PM10 and below. With respect to what the Air Resources Division considers to be respirable or what the DOH might consider to be respirable, I would need to defer to them.
And what are the limits, or what are the what do the guidelines say? What is the lower limit and upper normal limit?
I believe that, just to go back to your other question, that PM10 and below is considered respirable. And with respect to limits, are you referring to potential public health impacts, or are you referring to DEC regulations? Or
yeah, I was just wondering what standards you were going to use to evaluate your results.
Ben, I don't have the answer to that. Ben, or somebody from AIR, can you answer?
Yeah, well, I think, Diana, what we can do is we are putting together this comprehensive plan. I think your questions are great, and we do have, obviously other air experts that are listening to the communication tonight. And as we produce that plan and put it together, we'll make sure that that's addressed in what we put forward, so you can see exactly what we're doing. But we're looking at national ambient air standards, and obviously taking the best, all the tools we have in the toolbox on this. So we'll make sure that's clearly outlined for you.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I wanted to point that out is that you have the MS data sheet for Norlite, and those are considered employees on Norlite. Yet the people who live surrounding Norlite, between, say, 100 and 500 feet even, they're subjected probably to the same levels of contaminants as employees, with the only exception is their exposure is longer because they don't leave every day. They don't have an 8-hour shift. And plus, the population includes infants and older people. So generally, those ambient levels for non-employees are usually set at a standard that's more sensitive than in the MSDS. So I didn't know what those were, and I was just curious about it. And I'll just end and thank you for having the meeting tonight.
Sure, and we'll clarify that, I think, in our next conversation that we have, and get some additional experts on to walk you through that. And we'll make sure anything we put on our website on that contains some answers to those questions as well. So thanks, Diana. Not to cut questions off, but Regina, we'll take one more now and just head to the SPDES presentation next. But do we have any other questions right now?
Okay. I'm unmuting Sunny and Pearlie.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear us okay?
How are you?
Can you hear us?
Yep.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Ben, I would like to ask you, you mentioned that you were starting a complaint list starting on November 20th. But since this whole thing has been going on for 30 years, does the DEC have a record of complaints prior to November 20th?
Right. So tonight I just decided I'm not going to go through 30 years of complaints. I wanted to start from where we sampled so we can focus on that. But yes,
But you do have that record for legal purposes.
Yeah, there's records of
complaints.
There's records of complaints.
Okay.
And it's taken you 30 years to start sampling?
I focused tonight's presentation on sampling since November 24th.
So you've never sampled before November 24th, 2020?
No, that's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying I focused this presentation on sampling since November 24th.
But complaints have been going on for 30 years. We just want to understand that. We've lived in Cohoes for 24 years. This is a very important issue to us. And everything, I just want to say everything that Alexa said was articulated so much better than I could. I second everything that she said and all the questions that she's asked you. So I want to be clear about this. You've been receiving complaints for 30 years on Norlite?
I would say for various different components and, parts of the process operations. And, every complaint is evaluated. And on our website, there's a lot of information about, our track record of oversight and what we've, changes that we've required of the facility. And we're continuing, again, to build that case. And, we can, on a future one of these presentations, go into more of that history and walk you through exactly what the department has done and how we've addressed complaints and the issues and how they've been addressed. If that's something that folks want to hear about, we can definitely look into that. Again, Ben just wanted to go immediately as we ratchet down. Or what's that?
I'd like a straight answer. I just want you to answer whether you've been receiving complaints about Norlite for 30 years. Just yes or no.
Yes, I think as Ben said, we have been receiving complaints.
Okay. It's astounding to me. I may be very naive at all of this, but it's astounding to me that after 30 years, you're still giving these excuses. I'm sorry. We live here. Like Alexa said, you don't live there. I've been in touch with families who live down there. Children are playing in black snow. Would you like your children to play in black snow? I don't get it. 30 years of this. I'm sorry. I'm not encouraged at all by this meeting. It seems like a bunch of excuses. I'm sorry. Really, I don't mean to offend anybody, but as a newbie, this is what it seems to me. I've just heard excuse after excuse and all that DEC is doing, but this has been going on for 30 years.
Well, I don't think we're trying to give excuses.
It's appalling.
Pearlie, I appreciate your comments, and we're not trying to give excuses. Again, what we're trying to do is walk through exactly what we're doing to respond to these issues and move forward with the community, because that's our goal.
For 30 years.
Let me ask you this.
Unbelievable.
Were you taking samples, prior to November 20th? November 2020? Samples?
We take, and part of the next presentation is going to get into the water oversight and sampling that we take. This facility has many different DEC programs that are overseeing its various parts of its operation. And, previous presentations we've given on the mining side. We wanted to go into the water side tonight, as well as the air side. But the air side is comprehensive from both the particulate matter that we just spoke about to what comes out of the stacks as well as part of the incineration process. So there are a lot of different components of the DEC operation that are brought to bear on overseeing this facility. That's why, throughout the time in this 30-year track record, it's complaints about different parts of the process that then we've enforced against and made changes happen. So we have sampled for PM before, according to our experts. And again, I think our website goes into some of that additional information. Ben, is there anything else you'd want to say now, just on that track record and other sampling we've done?
The past sampling, it's all been out. I mean, to go through a presentation including all the sampling tonight, I wanted to make it relevant to what our actions are right now. The past, it's there. We can present on it.
We're just wondering. I mean, though we do continued sampling right now, if it's been done for 30 years, I mean, what hope do we have of something being accomplished?
Really?
Well, I think that we're collecting the data to make those changes happen, and that's why we're pinpointing the sampling as we've discussed. We're using the best scientific tools that we have to really analyze the fugitive dusts and ensure that we know the parts of the process operations that it's coming from, and again, hold the facility accountable. And this is how you build a scientific and regulatory case to make that happen, and that's what we're doing.
And if we need to call Norlite when we smell something or see something, what do they do with that information? Do they report it to you?
Ben or Tony, can you speak to that?
Yeah, I understand that on a monthly basis they need to report to us in a report every complaint that they've received. Ben or Kate, perhaps if you can confirm or elaborate on that.
Norlite does create a record when they get calls, and the other part of that, to be fully assured, is good to call both. So call Norlite immediately to not continue dealing with the problem, and call DEC to report the problem. That's why I stressed that in the presentation. Also, just to cut in on a little bit, those past sampling events that you were asking questions about, those were also reviewed by DOH and everything. So there was a lot of analysis that went through in the past. I mean, I clearly wasn't part of that, but there was a lot of analysis that went through with DOH, DEC, and other oversight on the past sampling events.
Yeah,
well, I mean, I really appreciate that obviously someone has been doing some work on this, but like that man was saying earlier, it is common sense. When you go down there and walk through the neighborhood, it's just so obvious about what is going on down there. Okay, so I don't even think that's a question anymore. Very obvious. So you're saying that when we call Norlite, they have to report that to you, and they have a record of complaints. Is that public, where we can look at the record of complaints?
If you submit a request to us under the Freedom of Information Law, that information will be provided to you.
No, I mean, does Norlite have are we able to access the complaints that people have made directly to Norlite?
Meaning on the facility's website?
Well, when you call that number, maybe I'm misunderstanding you. When you call that number at Norlite, when you smell something or see something, you said that goes into a record, correct?
Correct.
Are we able to see the complaints that have been registered? Can we access the record?
If you ask us for that, pursuant to FOIL, Freedom of Information Law, that will be provided to you.
By Norlite or DEC?
The FOIL request would come to us, so that would come to us. So the request comes to us, and then the response from us to you would include that information.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Sonny and Pearlie, I'll just say this too. I think, in general, these conversations are really helpful overall to us, making sure, because we want to be as transparent as we can for you, providing you the information that you want, and continuing to make sure we're working collectively with you on overseeing this facility. So, we want to make sure that you're getting the information that you're asking about and that you want. So we'll continue to evaluate how to make filing complaints easier and how to make that information accessible. So we're going to take that back as a team and make sure that you have access to that.
Thank you.
Well, appreciate you joining us this evening and for your questions and comments. Again, I don't want to cut these off, but we do have other presenters here tonight. So I'll turn it over now. And Ben, thank you for all your presentations tonight. But now from our water program, I know last time we had questions about our SPDES program, and we've got two of our water experts on with us tonight from DEC. I'd like to introduce Carrie Smith and Derek Thorsland, two water engineers from our Bureau of Water in the region, to give us an overview of the SPDES permits that go into overseeing Norlite. So why don't you take it away, Carrie and Derek.
Thanks, Sean. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
All right, excellent. So as Sean said, my name is Carrie Smith, and I'm a permit engineer at DEC in the Division of Water. I have experience developing SPDES permits for municipal and industrial wastewater discharges. In the next few slides, I'm just going to be providing a general overview of the SPDES program and the development of a SPDES permit. And then later in the session, Derek Thorsland, the regional water engineer, will provide specific insight into Norlite's SPDES permit and related activities. Next slide, please. Now, I'll ask you to just to bear with me as I go through the overview. There are a few acronyms in the SPDES world that are a little difficult sometimes to keep track of. So Section 402 of the Clean Water Act authorized the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System program to regulate wastewater discharges to waters of the United States. In 1975, New York State requested and became authorized to implement the NPDES program. And the state version of the NPDES program is known as the State Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, or SPDES. So the SPDES program mirrors the requirements of the NPDES program, but includes additional state-specific requirements. An example of a state-specific requirement is that New York's SPDES program regulates waters of the state, which includes both surface water and groundwater. The NPDES program, by comparison, only regulates surface water. There are two major terms that appear a lot in the SPDES world, and that is the concept of technology-based effluent limits, or TBELs, and water quality-based effluent limits, or QBELs. And those basically describe the basis for where the limits in a permit come from. Next slide, please. So this just outlines the basic steps of a SPDES permit. For all permittees, DEC will send a request for information, otherwise known as an RFI. The recipient, the permittee, will submit an application, and this, I should caveat, this is for existing facilities. The permittee will submit an application for a permit, and then DEC will take the application back and review it and start the process of developing a permit. And I have another slide where I'll get a little more specific on that step. The next step is the public notice. So it provides an opportunity for the public to review a permit and issue comments. And if a comment necessitates a change, that change is then documented in a responsiveness summary. And if a comment does not necessitate a change, DEC also documents the rationale in the responsiveness summary. And then finally, the permit is issued with a new effective date and a 5-year term. The SPDES permits are effective for 5 years. In the case of Norlite, DEC sent Norlite a request for information that outlined the materials that would need to be submitted to support the development of a SPDES permit. Norlite responded with a New York 2C application, which is consistent with the EPA requirements, as well as additional specific sampling for conventional pollutants such as biological oxygen demand, 13 priority pollutant metals, volatiles, acid compounds, base neutrals, pesticides, and PCB. And those make up pretty much a standard panel of pollutants that we ask permittees to review. And then DEC developed a SPDES permit to meet both state and federal requirements. And this included reviewing any federally designated industrial categories that might be applicable and applying appropriate permit limits. This also included reviewing any detected pollutants and comparing them to state water quality standards, and we applied permit limits as appropriate. Next slide, please. So the SPDES permit for Norlite includes two outfalls, outfall 003 and outfall 004. Outfall 003 consists of quarry dewatering wastewaters. Outfall 004 consists of landfill leachate and stormwater runoff. Both of these outfalls discharge to the Saltkill Creek, which is designated as a Class D water body. And as described in regulation, the best usage of Class D waters is fishing, and water quality must be suitable for primary and secondary contact recreation. As I alluded to earlier, in the development of a SPDES permit, all pollutants that are detected must be reviewed for possible permit limits. However, not all pollutants that are detected ultimately require a permit limit. And this might be because there may not be an applicable water quality standard, or if there was a detection, it may have been well below the water quality standard. And all of this rationale is documented in a SPDES fact sheet, which supports the permitting decisions and accompanies the permit as it goes through the public notice process. Next slide, please. And then consistent with the requirements of the federal NIPSEAS program and the state SPDES program, SPDES permits are publicly noticed to provide an opportunity for public involvement prior to the finalization of the permit. The Norlite permit was publicly noticed in both the Environmental Notice Bulletin and in the Albany Times-Union. We received comments from 7 different entities, and they included Norlite, EPA, Mohawk Sign Papers, as well as 4 private citizens. DEC responded to all the comments that were received in a response in the summary, which accompanied the final SPDES permit. And I think now Derek Forslund is up next, and he will be providing some of the specific insight into Norlite SPDES permit and the related activities.
Yes, thanks, Carrie. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Yes, my name is Derek Thorsland. I'm the Regional Water Engineer in DEC Region 4. And before we get into the current SPDES permit for Norlite, I'd just like to go through some of the SPDES closure activities that occurred recently. Next slide. So as mentioned earlier, Norlite's Project Delta did some upgrades to the air pollution control equipment, specifically the scrubber equipment for the kiln process. And that resulted in the elimination of wastewater discharges from outfall 6. Outfall 6 previously included the discharge of treated scrubber blowdown water. Next slide. So following the elimination of the wastewater discharges, Norlite also decommissioned the wastewater treatment equipment and associated piping following the applicable regulations. The applicable regulation is shown here, and this applies to all SPDES permittees. And the regulations are also available on our public website at the link shown here. Next slide. So the closure plan itself, following DEC review, the final closure plan was submitted on December 24th, 2019, and subsequently was approved by DEC, and the discharge to outfall 6 was eliminated on December 31st, 2019. And just some highlights of the plan, as I previously mentioned, it removed the influent sources. All the treatment units associated were drained and residuals removed. The residual waters and residual materials were properly disposed, and the outfall line was cut and capped and the piping removed. It's just important to note that the outfall 6, was decommissioned at the last manhole on Norlite's property. And this was done because prior to the outfall being decommissioned, Norlite utilized a storm sewer in the city of Cohoes that was owned by the city to convey their effluent to the receiving water from their property. So the outfall was decommissioned at that last manhole on their property. The storm sewer that was previously used remains in place. Next slide. So DEC did an inspection at the facility on July 30th to confirm that the closure components of the closure plan were implemented as indicated in the plan, and Norlite submitted the final closure documents to DEC on September 18th, 2020. Next slide. So now we'll get into some of the specifics about the SPDES permit, the current SPDES permit for Norlite. Next slide. So a little bit of history here first. A SPDES permit was first issued to Norlite in 1987, and that included, I believe, 3 outfalls to the salt kill. The last full technical review of the permit was done in 2017, and that's the process that Carrie described previously. And that was done under what's called the Environmental Benefit Permit Strategy, which is basically a priority ranking system that the Division of Water uses, under which we perform full technical reviews. The permit was most recently modified in November of 2019, and this was related to the changes necessary in the permit related to Project Delta. Next slide. So Norlite's SPDES permit is available on the department's website at the link shown here. This slide is a little bit hard to see, but when you go to that page of the department's public website, about halfway down, you'll see a section titled View SPDES Permits, and that will bring you into a drop box where you can navigate to the SPDES permit, and that's done starting with the folder for Region 4, that's the location of the facility, and then next, the type of permit. Norlite's SPDES permit is what we call an individual SPDES permit. That's what IND SPDES stands for. And then you can navigate to the actual permit number, which is shown here, and the permits are in an ascending numerical order. So you can scroll down and find that permit number, and you can view a PDF version of the actual permit, and we'll go through some of the applicable and relevant pages of the permit in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So this is the cover page of Norlite's permit. It provides the general information, the permit number, the address, the location, the permit class, the effective and expiration dates, as well as the receiving waters. This current permit is effective through October 31st, 2022, and it also lists the last modification date, which I previously mentioned as November of 2019. This permit is a Class 03 permit, which is one that is inspected regularly by the Division of Water. Next slide, please. So as Carrie previously mentioned, the current permit has 2 outfalls. This is the permit limits, levels, and monitoring requirements for outfall 3. This page lists the wastewater type, which is quarry water, the receiving water, the salt kill, and it establishes the effluent limitations for the parameters that required limits. And there are limits for pH, flow, total residual chlorine, total suspended solids, and settable solids. This page also establishes the frequency at which they need to monitor the effluent for these parameters and the type of sample that's required, whether it's a grab or a composite sample. Next slide. This is a similar page for outfall 4, which the type of wastewater is the shale fines leachate and stormwater runoff from a landfill area on site. This is a closed landfill. The receiving water is, again, the salt kill. And for outfall 4, there are effluent limitations for pH, temperature, flow, total residual chlorine, total copper, total suspended solids, total zinc, and there's also a whole effluent toxicity, a wet testing requirement. I'll get a little bit more into that on the next page. Next slide, please. So this page includes footnotes that are referenced in the prior two permit limits tables. It also establishes the requirements for the wet testing, and Norlite was required to do wet testing in 2018, and they will be required to do it again in 2023. It's done in 5-year intervals, and the wet testing that was performed in 2018 was all in compliance with the permit requirements. Next page, next slide, please. The permit also includes special conditions, and this requires Norlite to develop a best management practices plan. So they are required to develop, maintain, and implement this plan to reduce the potential for pollutants in their discharges. It also requires that Norlite update the plan when there's changes to the facility, and they need to do an annual review and submit documentation to the department that they've done this annual review of the BMP plan. Norlite's last internal review of the plan was done in April of 2020, and that was the result of changes from Project Delta and the elimination of outfall 6. Next slide. So the SPDES permit does also require that there is a notification sign at each of the outfalls. So both outfalls 3 and 4 do have an outfall sign. This page in the permit establishes the requirements of the sign. So if somebody from the public was to see a discharge or see something odd, there's contact information for both Norlite and the department on the sign, and it can be reported to us, and we would follow up on any complaints associated with something observed at an outfall. Next slide. So last but not least, the permit includes the recording, reporting, and additional monitoring requirements. So Norlite, as shown on the outfalls 3 and 4 limits tables, they are required to sample the outfall at the frequency established in those tables, and they are required to summarize that information and submit it to the department on a monthly basis, and it's submitted on a form called a discharge monitoring report, commonly referred to as a DMR, and that is now submitted to the department electronically through EPA's net DMR system. And that's kind of a summary of the applicable and relevant pages of the SPDES permit, and we will open it up to questions at this point.
Thanks, Derek and Carrie. Appreciate that quick walkthrough. We'll start with questions. I know from the chat there's some questions about enforcement history of any SPDES violations that may have occurred. Can either of you just talk about where folks can find more information on that, or some of the issues that were found on the Norlite enforcement history part of our page that talks about the SPDES violations that have occurred in the past?
Sure, I could touch on that briefly. You know, I don't have all of the enforcement history in front of me tonight. The intent of the presentation was to provide an overview of the SPDES permit. The information that is submitted on the DMRs through NetDMR does also populate EPA's ECHO database, and ECHO is an acronym for Enforcement and Compliance History Online. and that can be accessed by the public to see all of the enforcement history of the facility. You can search by the location or the SPDES permit number. So all that information is publicly available on that ECHO website. And if there's specific questions in the future, we can talk more about the compliance history.
Great.
That was
perfect. Well, thank you, Derek, for that. I think that addressed some of that. And again, EPA, I think some of the questions we're asking about some of the data with regard to what's collected under the SPDES permits, and that EPA ECHO website is a good place for folks to start to see some of that. And we can obviously, and the FAQ question, make sure that links are provided so folks can see more of that data. But Regina, we'll open it up to folks on the phone. For those that are still on, if anyone would like to ask a question now, please hit *3 to raise your hand. And Regina, do we have anyone who wants to ask a question?
Great. I have Dave P.
Hey, Dave.
Hey. Judith also had a question on there that I'm just going to read out loud. Please provide more details about landfill leachate being directly discharged into the salt kill. How much leachate is discharged, and please pose on the DEC website the latest testing of the leachate. Thank you. And then when you're finished with that one, I do have a question, which is the one that's right below that you sort of conveyed, Sean, but if you didn't get an answer for a fairly specific and easy to answer question. So start with Judith, and then we'll come back.
Sure. Again, Carrier, Derek, do you want to take the Judith question about the EPA ECHO website?
Okay.
Sure. So, go ahead, Derek,
go ahead.
if you have some.
I'm just trying to see what the question was here.
I think Judith's question was about the constituents of any leachate and the discharges potentially into the salt kill from that. I think one of you mentioned that earlier, and just where folks can find data, if we can post that data online.
Right. So I'm not too familiar with the history of when the landfill was closed exactly, but this is a closed landfill that includes, perhaps some residual contaminants, as well as stormwater discharges. It was sampled with the full panel of pollutants as part of the permit application and the most recent permit development. I don't have the permit right in front of me, so I'm not sure of the sampling frequency, but it is regularly sampled for the constituents that are identified, and all that information, as Derek and Sean have said, is available on ECHO, as well as EPA's integrated compliance information system.
So we'll make sure that there are links in the FAQs posted to that, Dave, so folks can see and get access to that information. And obviously, as you review that, if there are more questions, experts like Carrie and Derek are always available to answer those questions. So we'll move to your part 2 question, if you'd like.
This is the one where I basically cut and pasted a section of the Norlite enforcement history document that you can pretty easily look at. Obviously, it gets into some detail about the extent of the violations by Norlite, the chlorine, chromium, copper, flow rate, iron, lead, mercury, selenium, et cetera, all essentially, it looks like being dumped into the Mohawk. Norlite obviously just put recently $30 million into a renewed system, switched over from a wet scrubber to a dry scrubber system. And my impression was that for a long time they had been essentially disposing of maybe 100,000 gallons a day of treated water, in quotations. So this event that covers from November 1st, 2017 to 1st, 2019. First of all, that's a large chunk of time for something to go either unmonitored or unenforced. So if you could give me some details about that. And then also, is this event something that in the regulatory system allowed you to push Norlite or the EPA to push Norlite into updating their system as it has done? And the last question, is wet testing done? You said it's done every 5 years. Is it done at a predetermined time so that Norlite has all the warning in the world, or is it in any way a spot check?
I'll start with the wet testing one first. It's done quarterly during calendar years ending in 8 and 3. So it was done quarterly at outfall 4 in 2018, and it would be done again in 2023. And that is specified in their permit. Norlite is aware of that requirement. In terms of the previous outfall 6, the full technical review that was done in 2017 did result in some more stringent effluent limits that were imposed to outfall 6 from prior versions of the permit. And the permit provided a schedule of compliance and time for Norlite to come into compliance with those new limits. So they were working towards figuring out what was necessary to achieve those new final limits. And through that process, and for other reasons, Norlite decided that they were going to undertake Project Delta, which ultimately eliminated the discharge from outfall 6. You know, the permit did not require that discharge or outfall be eliminated. The path that Norlite decided on with Project Delta, did ultimately eliminate it. So there were some past compliance issues that were dealt with recently, and Norlite had already committed to Project Delta at that time, so the recent enforcement did result in enforceable schedules for them to implement Project Delta and ultimately eliminate outfall 6, which was done by the required date of December 31st, 2019. So in general, in relation to the 2 remaining outfalls, Norlite has currently or is currently in compliance with the effluent limitations in outfalls 3 and 4.
Sean, I may have one extra question for you.
Sure.
If I may ask it. Okay. So this has been on my mind for a little while, and that EPA report that came out in May of 2020, they go into some detail about violations in their scrubber system that extended for 3.5 years worth of time. And I guess what I'm wondering about, so, the EPA, they come and they find something, they also do some backtracking, they gather records, they figure out, oh, this violation is going on for this lengthy period of time. How is that something that the, DEC oversight and your on-site monitor, they miss that? How does that occur?
Oh, Dave, that's something I'd have to look into with our folks just to answer more specifically.
If you want to give me a written response, that would be great.
Sure, we can look at doing an FAQ on that for you, Dave, and providing some more information on that, because I just have to look. I don't have the EPA case right next to me right now, and I just want to go over that with our folks and make sure we unpack that right to ensure that we answer that correctly. Excellent. Well, Dave, thanks for your questions. Regina, do we have anyone else on the phone or on the WebEx who'd like to ask questions of our SPDES folks?
I have Philip Oswald.
I had 2 quick questions, and I'm sorry if I missed the first one. I had to step away for a second, but is there any document or any FAQ or any page that I can look at to see where the discharges enter the Mohawk River?
Derek or Terry, can you talk about the map?
Yes, the SPDES permit provides the coordinates of all of the outfalls. I guess just to add to that, outfall 6, which was the one that went to the Mohawk River, is the one that has been eliminated.
Okay,
so
that was eliminated.
There's no longer a discharge to the Mohawk River.
Okay, thanks, Derek. And the other question is, according to EPA's ECHO site, there has not been and again, this is just according to the ECHO site, but there hasn't been a DMR filed for them for the last 3 quarters, I think. Is that correct, or am I looking at that incorrectly?
There was an issue where the permit, when we modified the permit in 2019, November of 2019, it indicated that Outfall 6 would expire on April 1st of 2020. Norlite actually eliminated the discharge prior to that. So there was an issue where the outfall had been eliminated prior to the permit saying that it needed to be, or prior to the date which it expired in the permit. So there was a 3-month period in early 2020 where it was more of an administrative issue where there was no discharge, and that was resolved in that since there was no discharge, the outfall had been eliminated, those DMRs did not need to be submitted.
Do they have to submit DMRs for outfalls other than 6?
Yes. The 2 remaining outfalls 3 and 4, they submit a discharge monitoring report monthly.
Do you know, Derek, as you sit here, if those were submitted for the past 3 quarters?
I believe they have been, and I don't have the specifics in front of me, but I did touch base with our Bureau of Water Compliance prior to the meeting tonight, and they have indicated that they have been or are in compliance with the permit requirements for outfall 3 and 4.
Yeah, and Philip, obviously, we can, you can submit some other questions to Derek and others offline just to go into that more and make sure we get you the information that you need to. But
sure.
Sorry to cut you off there, Derek.
There is a slight lag. The discharge monitoring report for, let's just say, April is not due until the 29th day of the following month, which gives them time to prepare the DMR. So if you're looking for the month prior's DMR early in the next month, it may not have been submitted yet.
Thanks. And one more real quick follow-up. If I were to submit a FOIL request, is there a paper version of the DMR that DEC keeps, or is that all something that's completely entered through the NetDMR site?
It is all submitted through the NetDMR site, and it is an electronic file. I think that my understanding is our central office would compile that data from NetDMR to respond to a FOIL request.
Thanks.
Thank you. Regina, do we have any more questions for our water folks?
Yep. So we have call-in user 19. I can't see your name, but I'm going to unmute you now.
I have a question. My question is this. Do you think it's right to kill the fish that are in that creek in the salt kill? Did you hear me?
Yeah, we heard you.
Do you think it's right? Do you think it's right to kill those fish?
Well, no. Anytime there's a fish kill that DEC observes or there's issues, we obviously enforce against that. It's part of our goal to protect the environment.
It's every time you discharge that water into the creek, you kill those fish.
Well, I think if there were fish kills, we would obviously take that into consideration and pursue enforcement against that. Fish kills are not allowed through DEC law or regulation. So that's something that we make sure doesn't happen, and if it does, we take action.
No, it does happen. It does happen.
If you ever
I live 50 feet from that creek. It goes right by my house. I know it happens. I see fish going up that stream in the spring. They go up there to spawn. And that's it. They're dead after that. They just about make it up there. When you discharge that water into that salt kill, you kill all the fish. Not only the fish, but you kill everything that's down right into the Hudson. And not only that, but that water goes down the Hudson, down to Poughkeepsie. They drink that water. And I'm not saying that those fish are belly up. They come right by my house. Who checks that?
Well, Ed, I mean, obviously, again, through the complaints that we were talking about today, that's not exclusive to just air complaints or dust complaints. Complaints or issues regarding fish kills are something we take very seriously. And if you notice something or see something, we will respond to it, and we need to hear those type of complaints. So anytime you see something like that, please let us know so we can investigate it.
I'm sorry, but this is water problem. This is a water problem. When you discharge water out of a pond up there and discharge it into a different temperature water, you're killing anything that's in that stream. Did you ever change your fish bowl? What do they tell you? They tell you to get the temperature the same so that you don't kill the fish. And this is what you're doing. You're emptying those kilns or those ponds into the creek, and you're killing everything in that creek. That's not right.
Well, as part of what our two last presenters walked through, these are the way we oversee those discharges in that facility. And again, if there's an environmental impact, such as a fish kill or something like that, that's something we take seriously and obviously enforce against. So if you see something like that, please let us know so we can get our experts out on the ground to look at that.
You don't have to see it. Just think what you're doing. You're emptying warm water sometimes into a cold water creek. Sometimes you're getting debris from all around that's emptying into that pond, and you're pumping it out, and you're getting all the silt in the fish's gills. It don't take a rocket scientist to know that that's damaging the creek.
Yep, and that's, our last two presenters walked through the permit programs that obviously evaluate that and create enforceable limits and enforce against that. So that's how we effectively oversee facilities like Norlite and others in the state with discharges like this. And again, we take very seriously.
There should be a DEC person right there when they're discharging in that creek and see if they're killing fish. Why should it be left up to me to see if there's a complaint?
Well, no, I'm just saying if you're seeing something that's concerning, like you're alleging, we need to hear that.
I'm not alleging. This is fact. I live 50 feet from that creek. I see the fish coming down.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, Ed, let us know, and we'll make sure our monitor polices the salt kill then. As part of his routine. It should be monitored. It should be monitored by DEC, NCON, or whoever takes care of the fish area should be over there when they put that in. The temperature out of that pond should be equal to the temperature in the creek. Thank you, Ed. We'll obviously take that into consideration, and I know our water folks, and we'll work with our wildlife folks to check that out if we get a complaint. And we'll walk with our monitor on that too.
Well, am I wrong on that? The temperature in the creek and the temperature in a pond, if it's different temperatures, it wouldn't matter as far as fish are concerned? Are you saying that to me?
No, I'm saying the permit programs that we have evaluate that, as our experts just walked through. And it's something that we take into consideration when we evaluate potential discharges on a water body. And we also have to look at what the classifications are of the different water bodies that are receiving a discharge. So in this case, the salt kill in this area is considered a Class D stream, so there are different regulatory requirements and things that pertain to that versus different classifications of streams. It's a very, scientific-based and complex oversight program that we do, but we'll make sure that our water folks and our wildlife folks are taking a look at that and taking it seriously. But again, if you're seeing something like a fish kill, please let us know, because that's something we need to see and respond to immediately. But we'll also do our own monitoring as well.
I hear you, but it shouldn't be left up to me. You should know better that temperatures fluctuate. A high temperature in a creek and a warm temperature out of a pond will kill what's ever there. You should know that. I know that.
Nope.
Well,
and again,
okay.
thanks
Thanks anyway.
Yep. No, and again, our experts walk through the permit programs, and we can include some FAQs on the website more about that, just to address those points. But thank you again for joining us tonight and those important questions. Regina, do we have anyone else who would like to ask a question at this time?
Joe Ritchie.
Hi, yes. I know. I just wanted to reiterate the stuff that Ed was saying. When I was younger, I used to play in that salt kill all the time with my friends because I thought it was cool. I thought it was like going to my grandfather's in the Adirondacks and exploring a pristine creek. And clearly it's not like that. In retrospective, I should have never gone in that creek because when I was younger, I would notice, and again, I had no idea how to call the DEC or anything like that when I was 10. But the water had an interesting film on it. It was very colorful, especially near Norlite in that big giant pool. And then when the police actually saw us playing in the pond, in the creek there, they said, "Oh, you guys can stay down there." Cohoes police, they said, "But just please don't eat the fish." So again, it's a pretty sick joke, but before this whole PFAS issue, the community had absolutely no idea what to do when they saw these situations. I think it's great now that we have the resources, but you can't expect people like Ed and me when I was 10 years old to have reported that back then when we saw it. Now we know, and I think what the on-site monitor needs to do needs to be a community-led decision. I mean, we fund your payroll. This should all be a community-based decision on what that on-site monitor does, because clearly, in the past 15 years, when I was 10, the on-site monitor did nothing in regards to that creek or the area. So I think there needs to be a comprehensive community plan set out for the new and oncoming on-site monitor, because more needs to be done. And, kids playing in that creek, I haven't seen any go down there lately, but God only knows what's in that creek. And I really am just nervous for my future and my health. Of other things that I was doing when I was younger, I had no idea what I was doing, sort of like the children now playing in that dirty snow that was mischaracterized earlier by just black spectacles. When you pick that snow up, your fingers and hands are black. There was no questioning about that, okay? And I went up by Cohoes, by the high school where, wealthier people live. The snow wasn't black. I don't know where you're looking. It's just more like a statement and maybe a question that going forward, I don't think this kind of stuff with the on-site monitors is doing, their name, how to contact them should be closed doors. We fund the payroll. We should have direct say in what happened in regards to our community. Thank you.
Yep. No, Joe, and I would just say that the conversations like these are important for us to take back the information and concerns that you and other community members are giving us tonight so that we can continue to enhance our enforcement and oversight of this facility. And that's exactly the type of community engagement that we want and we use as part of our efforts. And, we are always open to continue that dialogue and hear from you of, other things that you need us to monitor for or evaluate. I mean, all that is taken into consideration. And again, we use the best available science that we have to direct a lot of that as well. But part of that is also listening to you. And these conversations are very important to that. And we really appreciate comments like that. So thanks, Joe. Regina, do we have anyone else who'd like to ask a question at this time?
Yep. We have Alexis Goldsmith.
Hey, Alexis.
Okay. Thanks. I just want to back up what Ed was saying earlier and just comment that water is life and all water is connected. We are in a climate and ecological emergency. We have lost 2/3 of all of the wildlife on Earth in just 50 years. I mean, that's incomprehensible, the kind of emergency that we're facing. The carbon concentration in the atmosphere from the Mauna Loa Observatory in Hawaii yesterday was 415.55 parts per million. We have got to fundamentally change our philosophy of the way we approach our relationship with nature. And Norlite gives off massive amounts of heat. It has a massive effect on the environment, and it won't belong in a post-climate catastrophe world.
Thanks, Alexis, for that comment. And obviously, again, we take all those very seriously as part of our regulatory programs that we've developed, and as we continue to evaluate and change them and make them more stringent, those are part of our goals of working with you, and we need to hear those type of concerns and comments. And also, too, just to clarify, based on some of the comments on the chat, I wasn't asking Ed or any of you to sit by a stream and watch for things. I'm saying if you see something, as Ben said earlier, say something. So if you're seeing a fish kill happening anywhere in the state, in the salt kill or anywhere else, please report that to the DEC. We need eyes and ears on the ground like that to be able to respond to something and investigate it. And that's how we work with you to ensure we're properly overseeing the environment. It's not that I'm saying that we're not going to be monitoring for those things, but if you see something, please log that complaint. And those are one of the key messages that we wanted to get across tonight. And again, it's how we work directly with you to oversee a facility and respond to the issues that you're seeing in your community. So I hope that clarifies that point. And Ed, again, we appreciate you bringing this to our attention so we can factor that into our ongoing monitoring. I'll save questions now till the end because I did just want Tony and Kate to give a quick update of the permitting process and where we are. So Tony, why don't you just take us away here, and then we'll close it out with a few more questions.
Sure. Thanks, Sean. My name is Tony Luisi. I'm the Acting Regional Director for DEC Region 4. Regina, next slide, please. We wanted to take this opportunity to make sure the public is fully understanding of where we are in the permitting process. As most people know, currently pending before DEC are 2 applications from the facility, one for the Air Title V permit and the other for the Hazardous Waste Management Facility permit. Like I said earlier, we received those applications in July of last year. They are not yet complete for purposes of the Uniform Procedures Act and some technical considerations, and we're still very early in the process. I'll let Kate get into a little bit more detail of what people can expect going forward, but we did require the facility to provide certain additional written submissions that we outlined in a notice to them back in August. Those submissions were received by DEC by the end of 2020. Those are currently under review by all involved regulatory agencies. But I think it would be helpful for everyone to hear a little bit more directly from our Deputy Regional Permit Administrator, Kate Kornack, with some more details, and then, of course, we can take some questions. So I'll turn it over to Kate.
Hi, so I'm Kate. Like Tony mentioned, Deputy Regional Permit Administrator, work in the Schenectady office, and I handle permitting for Norlite. So I'm going to talk a bit about the public participation aspect of our permitting process and going forward. So part of the permit review process is going to be community participation. Engagement with the community is going to be key. So here's what community members can kind of expect from our process going forward. Norlite recently resubmitted some documents to the department as of December 2020, like Tony mentioned. One of those was they developed a draft public participation plan, and that's currently being reviewed by our Office of Environmental Justice as well as regional staff. The plan has to promote the fair involvement of the community in our permitting process. It's got to provide public access to all permit information, require public meetings, and incorporate public concerns into our review process. The first of multiple environmental justice public meetings is going to be held before DEC will be able to determine whether the applications are even complete. And the reason that we're holding this before completeness is so we can ensure that any of the draft permits are responsive to public comments and concerns that have been expressed to us, and also responsive to the results of the required submissions from the facility. Additionally, within the December 2020 resubmissions was a draft protocol for a comprehensive human health and ecological risk assessment report, and also a protocol for the community health outcome data report. So these protocols are currently under review by our department as well as Department of Health and EPA. and the public will also have an opportunity to comment on these protocols during the environmental justice meetings, as well as ongoing public participation processes. Neighbors and members of the public are going to have opportunity to attend these public meetings that will be held either virtually or in person if the COVID protocols allow at the time. And they'll be able to submit their comments or questions to the facility about past and current operations, the results of the reports that are being required as part of our permit review process, and technical aspects of the permit application. So the facility is also going to set up a document repository that will be accessible by the public. And Norlite, the facility itself, is going to be required to answer all public comments and questions before DEC will be able to determine that the requirements of the environmental justice process have been satisfied. So this feedback that we'll receive from the environmental justice process and the public comment period, as well as our administrative and technical reviews, are all going to be used to inform and guide our final decision making. In addition, U.S. EPA will also have 45 days to accept, reject, or provide recommended changes to any draft permits that may be written. So if you have questions or comments about the facility at any point during this process, not only during the designated public comment periods, feel free to email them to our Norlite inbox, which is comments.norlite2020@dec.ny.gov. Your email that you send to that inbox will be either directed to an individual staff person for response, or if your question takes a little more time and research for us to compile, an answer will be batch uploaded to our website. And I just want to point out that on the screen right now is a graphic that shows the permitting process. So we're currently in very early stages of this. We're on the orange box on the right now, so literally the very first stage. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for involvement along the way. Questions?
Excellent. Thank you, Kate and Tony, for that. Regina, do we have any other questions that have come in? Again, if you're on the phone and like to ask a question, hit *3 to raise your hand, and we'll unmute your line. Or raise your hand on the WebEx, and we'll get to you.
Okay, so Rachel? Yep, Rachel, I'm unmuting you right now.
Hey, Rachel.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
I guess my only question is, why is Norlite, with all of its past violations on the DEC website, and just looking through the amount of violations they've had over the last 30 years, and you guys talking about how you're enforcing them, why would you even consider giving a permit to somebody you know is going to break it? Like, if I were to apply for a loan and you were to look at my history, and I've broken every loan, I've had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to somebody because I've broken the law multiple times, why would you consider once again being like, okay, here's your permit again?
So we are required to take action on any permit applications that are put before us. And I think the processes that have been explained throughout the night show the steps that we're required to take in responding to those permit applications.
Yeah, and I'll just add, there are a variety of statutory and regulatory requirements, both substantive and procedural, that as a governmental agency we are required to follow, and that's what we are doing.
Thank you, gang, and thank you very much for your question. Regina, do we have anyone else who would like to ask questions this time?
Yep, Joe Ritchie.
Hey, Joe.
Hello. I'm actually kind of spacing out, but I guess to piggyback on Rachel, at the end of the day, DEC has the ultimate authority to do whatever they want with this. And yes, they have to go through this process, but at the end of the day, they can still deny them. And I guess everyone, well, not everyone, but clearly, but most people on this panel would like the DEC to not approve this permit because they clearly do not listen. They just don't. And I just don't know how you can have the faith, the trust, and the transparency in Norlite to do what they're supposed to do. The people who run that facility, quite frankly, are evil, and they do not care about the residents of Saratoga site, Cohoes, or the surrounding area. It's just a fact. And this is the issue because I don't want to go off a tangent, but our system is set up to protect these agencies, to protect these companies. As Rachel mentioned, if you have really bad credit, you're not getting a car, you're not getting a house, you're not getting anything, except you're going to be paying an extraordinary rate on your car bill because, frankly, the car dealership doesn't trust you. And I can make that correlation because I know people where that happens to. So the DEC needs to just not accept this permit if they really, truly are for the people. I get they have to go through this process, but at the end of the day, they do not have to accept the permit. They have to review it, but they do not have to accept it. And that's pretty much, I'm trying to think here. I was going to say something else, but it's been a long night, but that's pretty much what I have to say. Worked at Saratoga sites for 20 years. Norlite's been my horrible neighbor for 20 years. I have no idea what I've breathed in for the past 20 years. And in the 20 years' time, I may not know why I'm sick randomly or why my neighbors are sick right now. You know, it's just, it keeps getting said here, and I think all the local officials on this call, they really need to wake up and really see that the situation is so much bigger than what it is, and that the residents are not, they do not have the time or the health or the capacity to wait for test after test after test. We've waited 30 years, more than 30 years. We've waited 50 years. The time is up for this facility. Cohoes cannot be a green city if Norlite is in this town. It just simply can't. And it just can't go with the governor's 50-50, 2050 goal of zero net emissions. It just doesn't make sense. That's all I have to say. I appreciate you guys having this community forum, but it's been woefully inadequate from my standpoint.
I'm sorry you feel it's been inadequate. We try to get our experts to have a forum here to provide you with solid scientific information about how the department is, again, overseeing this facility on your behalf, and our commitment to you and the community. And Joe, I think we'll take your comments obviously very seriously, and as part of the permit process that Kate and Tony outlined, you'll have more opportunities to provide comments like that as well, and we'll take them into consideration. So appreciate you being with us and staying on the whole time. Regina, do we have any other questions here tonight?
Yep. Dave P.
Hey, Dave.
Hello. So that was the last section. Is that correct, Sean?
Yeah, this was the last presentation for this evening.
Great. So this is a good opportunity to ask a question that I think is in the back of many people's minds, and that is that the DEC committed to doing what we consider to be fairly narrow scope of tests regarding PFAS, and that was back in September. And as far as I know, no results have come from that. I have been taking certain seminars on the Eurofins, and the impression that I get is that it doesn't take that long to do, tests of PFAS. And of course, the number of tests that are out there that are recognized is a tiny percentage of the actual chemicals in the PFAS family. But my question is, when are you going to release whatever results you have? And are you waiting until you get what you consider to be the entire thing done, or are you going to be more fair to the community and less opaque and just release things as you get them so that we have a chance to digest, as you are clearly digesting, whatever the results are?
Yeah, no opaqueness, Dave, and we talked about it a little earlier. Our experts, we did collect the data in October. We got that back. It had to go through a QA/QC process and a validation process, and now our experts are putting together a comprehensive report on that data. And our goal is to put it all out there for you so you can see, and then provide our expert analysis on what the data is showing us, how we're interpreting it, and where we go from here. So that is very much in the final phases now. It wasn't able to be completed by this session tonight, but we do anticipate having another community forum in the very near future to go over that, since we know there's a lot of interest in it. So it's very close to the finish line here. We didn't want to rush our scientists because it's again, we want to give them the space they need to look at this data and make sound scientific conclusions from it, and that's very much what they're doing right now.
Okay, so I'd like to add one more comment related to that, and that is I did an interview, which I just posted a link to, with Dr. David Carpenter, who is a highly respected doctor and a knowledgeable person in terms of PFAS and other contaminants like that. And, I asked him why it was that the Cuomo administration, the DOH, the DEC, it's basically all under Cuomo when it comes right down to it, why they would not initiate blood tests. And it's disturbing because, unlike Hoosick Falls, where people are exposed on a regular basis and so they're ingesting it through the water, when people have inhaled it, their bodies are going to, excrete it over time. And so if you wait long enough, you never will find something. And it seems sometimes that whether it's the DEC or the DOH or the Cuomo in general, it's like if you don't see it, it's not there. And if you wait long enough, it will go away. And I think I speak for the whole community on this, that we find it extremely unacceptable and highly disturbing that there has been no effort to take blood samples from the people who were likely directly and will be directly affected by this contamination for the rest of their lives. So we find this to be unacceptable.
Yeah, and Dave, we do have some DOH colleagues on who could talk about biomonitoring. I don't know, Tom or Betsy, do you want to mention anything on that?
Yeah, hi, this is Betsy Lewis-Michael. We've been involved in biomonitoring in Hoosick Falls and elsewhere in the state. And Gary Ginsberg, my colleague, addressed this question at an earlier event. It's very important to us to have the best information available about the exposure before we undertake a blood testing exercise. And the environmental data that's being reviewed in the report that was just being discussed will be very important for us to inform us about how to talk about blood testing and what that might tell us.
I'm sorry. That appears to be absurd. All of the different physicians that I've spoken to about this, they state that inhalation is a real issue. You don't just get it from the water, okay? And these people were exposed to it through a certain period of time, okay? For 2 years, they're not likely inhaling it now, unless, of course, it's in the dust, which it very well could be, okay? So...
Excuse me, I didn't say that inhalation is not a pathway of exposure. That's a very important exposure pathway, and we know that from other sites and from occupational people who've had their blood tested who had occupational inhalation exposures. What I'm saying is that with all the various thousands of PFAS chemicals, we wouldn't want to do a blood testing study that didn't look for what people actually had been exposed to. So the more we can learn from the efforts that are being summarized now in this report that's in its final stages of being drafted, the more we can learn, the better we would be able to address this community with discussing biomonitoring. We wouldn't want to be doing a biomonitoring study that some people in retrospect could say was designed to not find anything. So we need to have quite a bit more information, if possible, before we discuss blood testing. But we're certainly available to discuss blood testing, and people can reach out to the health department about more specific questions about blood testing. We're happy to discuss it. And it's, as we've said from the beginning, we wanted to learn more about exposure first.
Yeah, I would encourage people to listen to that interview, not because I'm trying to, promote myself in any way. It's more like whatever, I'm trying to promote what Dr. Carpenter had to say, which is that time is of the essence on this one. And in terms of some of the other dialogues that have come about this issue before, I've learned that in terms of the tests that are available for PFAS, if there are 5,000 plus variations on PFAS chemicals, and there's probably available recognized testing for maybe, a tiny fraction of that, like 1% or something like that. The idea that you have to do these soil tests to find out, what's there to start with before you test the people, it just does not make sense. I'm sorry. Once again, reiterating what we are seeing here tonight, common sense is an issue and common sense is being ignored. I'm sorry, but that's what's happening.
Well, Dave, sorry you feel that way, but again, I think Betsy, walked through a high-level overview here, and I think as the tests get, as the report gets put together by our experts and we unveil that, we'll make sure Betsy and her folks are on to address health-related questions and talk about how they're evaluating that report and moving forward in the future. So definitely we'll include that in one of our upcoming community forums like this and keep that conversation going. But appreciate you with those questions now. And again, Betsy and DOH are available, and we'll make sure that their contact information is available where you can get in touch with them. So Regina, do we have any more questions here? I know the hour's getting late, but want to give folks who haven't had a chance to ask questions here an opportunity.
All right, Christopher?
Hi, thanks. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Great. I just have one comment. I'd just say that, I really thank you to all the people who showed up tonight, including DEC. I fully encourage you to continue undertaking these deep scientific studies of the problems potentially coming from Norlite, but I'd really ask you to consider the track record and the history and just reiterate what a lot of other people said earlier. This is a common sense issue. Anybody with a reasonable understanding of the issue would come to the conclusion that Norlite has been a persistent problem and a plague on the area. And I'd remind you of the last thing I'll say, the precautionary principle. When there is substantial, credible evidence of danger to human or environmental health, protective action should be taken despite continuing scientific uncertainty. So in response to all of these continuing studies, do something now, help us now, and tell us that nothing was wrong later. But right now there's reasonable, credible evidence of danger to human and environmental health that's unambiguous and proven, documented through, your history of violation and enforcement actions, and also Dave Walker's careful work under the microscope to demonstrate that, a high rate of dust deposition is emanating from Norlite that could cause all sorts of serious lung diseases, including cancer and pulmonary fibrosis. So, with that in mind, I'm just really saying cover the piles, cover the conveyor belts. To hell with this water issue that you're talking about. It doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. Stop asking people to complain every time they see something and have somebody stop by randomly on a weekly or biweekly basis and see what's going on at Saratoga sites and start sampling proactively rather than, in a responsive manner to complaints. You know what the issues are. I really, really respect all of you, and I'm very, very grateful that you're studying this. But take action in parallel under the precautionary principle. Help us. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yep. No, thanks, Chris. And, I hope you heard the actions that we are taking tonight and the way that we are acting. And we're going to continue to act because that is our commitment to you. And this is the process in which actions are made.
Well, the actions are a little insufficient. Cover the piles. Just acknowledge the problem. Cover the piles while you figure this stuff out.
Well, no, that's the thing, though.
This fugitive dust plan that you have is completely insufficient. We know it. We've demonstrated it to you through, very careful scientific microscopy by one of the best geologists on the planet. And we're telling you this is a problem. We know that this stuff causes disease, and it's depositing on our neighborhood at a rate much, much faster than the background rate would be in a normal place. Your comments about it being normal background type material were simply offensive and should be retracted. And we have, unambiguous, indisputable evidence that this stuff is piling up at rates much higher than in the normal community. Please cover the damn piles.
Yeah, Chris, I think as Ben said, we're looking to pinpoint exactly where on the facility the dust is most likely coming from because we're not seeing it from the piles necessarily. So we want
there
to
is
take
a
the
pile
right
100 feet high and 500 feet wide sitting at the southeast corner of that property behind many of my friends' homes that is obviously not wetted down and is obviously a source of this dust. There are obviously other sources of this dust. It obviously has volcanic characteristics under the microscope. I have 20 years of microscopy expertise. This stuff is unambiguously coming from their site. It's depositing at rates much, much higher than anywhere else. Cover everything and then figure out what to do. Help us now.
Yep, no, Chris,
this absolutely unambiguous public health risk. There is no doubt about the risk to the people in that neighborhood. And then figure it out. Stop studying things. Help us now.
Well, we're on it, Chris, and we appreciate those
You're
comments.
not on it. Do it now. You have you have the authority. Do it now.
That's why we're taking the steps that we have, and we're making changes happen, and that's what we're doing.
I can't wait to see it. I'm sorry I'm getting a little heated here, but it's been a long night, and I really appreciate your time.
Chris, we hear you loud and clear.
Yep.
Thank you. Good night.
I know there's some questions about Tomahawk Reservoir testing. We didn't test it as part of this analysis that we're doing because there had been recent and prior testing done on the reservoir, and a lot of that data is available both on the City of Troy's website, but also in some of the work that we've done on Hoosick Falls as part of the municipal water supply study. So I'd encourage you to take a look at that if you want to have a full understanding of Troy's or the Tomahawk Reservoir and any detections of emerging contaminants on that. So, Regina, take a couple more questions here, and then we'll close this down for the evening. But who else would like to ask a question?
Alexis Goldsmith, your line's unmuted now.
Thanks. Yeah, just follow-up question. Was the testing of the Tomahawk Reservoir done after the AFFF was burned?
Yes, it was done as part of the municipal water supply study in Hoosick Falls in 2019.
But was it done after Norlite ceased burning their AFFF in December of 2019?
I have to look. I don't have the study with me right now, Alexis, but the municipal water supply study will have that information on the exact sampling dates in 2019.
Okay. I would just think that you would know for sure because 2 million pounds of AFFF being burned at Norlite and Tomahawk Reservoir is in the predominant prevailing winds, and it's only the drinking water supply for 50,000 people. So I'd really like to know if that water was tested for the AFFF contamination.
Sure, it was tested for a full suite of perfluorinated compounds as part of the municipal water supply study for Hoosick Falls. So there's a lot of data and information in that report on that, and we'll also look at making sure that that's posted online so you can find it easily.
And I'll just mention that we did look at the Cohoes and Green Island water supplies after the discontinuance of the PFAS at the facility, and we did not see any issues.
Thanks, Tony. All right, any more questions, Regina?
I don't. That's it for hands raised. Is there anybody else that needs to ask a question? *3 for those on the phone. That's it that seems to be it.
Excellent. Well, folks, thanks very much for joining us. Thank you once again to all our presenters tonight. I know the hour went late here, but as part of our commitment to you, we want to make ourselves available and keep these conversations going for however long you want to talk to us. It's what we're here for, and it's what we want to continue with you. Obviously, we talked about some of the next parts of the process with regard to the permits, but we know that you want to get the results of the study, and our goal is to get that out very soon. I think we've got some other agenda items for future calls. So we'll continue to work with the mayor and build these out, and we'll keep you posted on the next forum that we'll hold on this. And again, thank you for all the great questions and comments tonight that we really do take to heart and factor into all the work that we have ongoing on this site. So appreciate everyone tonight. Regina, thank you for monitoring the back end here, and again for all the presenters from DEC who are on the phone tonight. So thanks, everyone.